Welcome to Poker Fraud Alert Radio. This is a continuation of the show which ended on November 14th. Right now it's November 16th, about 48 hours later. And I'm going to try to finish off what I was doing the other day. I just got very tired. It's getting hard to think, getting hard to talk. So I shut it down, and I'm back now. Of course, it's late at night again. It's 2:38 in the morning. So we don't know how long I'm going to last this time, but hopefully longer. Hopefully I can get the show finished. You can text me anytime, during the show, after the show, before the show, and I will respond to you most of the time. Sometimes I'll forget, but usually I'll respond to you. 775-372-8355. You can find the show in podcast format because most of you can't listen to 3 in the morning Pacific time. I understand that. So you can find it in podcast format on iTunes, TuneIn, iHeartMedia, Spotify, Audible, Odyssey, Amazon Alexa. Just say, Alexa, play Poker Fraud Alert Radio podcast. Say it slowly so it understands. Castbox, and perhaps most importantly, YouTube. We have been on YouTube for a while now, and every show we are doing going forward is on YouTube, and you listen to it the same way on there as you would through a normal podcasting platform because it doesn't have any video to it. It just has a logo of Poker Fraud Alert up there. But a lot of you wanted YouTube. It's right there. And we get a tiny bit of money. When I say a tiny bit, I really mean a tiny bit. But we do get a tiny bit of money when you listen on YouTube. And I try to keep the ads to a minimum. And I try to place them between segments so they don't really interrupt anything. And some people have asked, will it hurt you if I skip the ads? No. Go ahead and skip the ads all you want. I'm just happy you're using the YouTube. So I'm giving you a lot of different ways to listen to the show. You can even download an MP3 of the show and play it that way. In fact, that works on any device by going to the Radio Archives forum on pokerfraudalert.com. I'm going to give you the agenda, and then we'll get going. ESPN Bet got a divorce from Penn Gaming. They are no longer part of Penn Gaming. This is actually the second divorce that Penn Gaming has had with a brand that they were associated with. But don't worry, ESPN has bounced back. They've had a rebound, and they have made a new partnership. They have a new marriage with DraftKings. I'll tell you about this whole weird story involving ESPN Bet, Penn Gaming, and even Barstool Sports. Monarch, whose real name is Ossi Ketola, who has been known recently for playing very, very high-stakes heads-up matches with people like Jungle Man, but also for his very boorish and immature behavior on social media. Well, he got banned from X, probably for that immature and bigoted behavior that he exhibited on social media. And when I say bigoted, I mean like really, really blatantly bigoted. I don't just mean like moderately bigoted, or I'm not trying to be politically correct here. I mean, this guy was just very blatantly racist. But anyway, he got banned from X, but more interestingly, he is now claiming that his ban was the result of bribery. He claims that an owner of a rival casino company, because he owns a casino website as well, bribed corrupt people at X, and that they banned him, and he's trying to get back on. I will read his statement, and I will tell you whether or not I believe him. Then I have a report. This is an unconfirmed report. It came from Vital Vegas, but I think he's onto something. Caesars will supposedly be phasing out the Grand Bazaar Shops. That's the shops and restaurants right behind the Horseshoe, right across from the valet area at Horseshoe, that a lot of World Series of Poker players use to grab a cheap meal on breaks. And that is the best value you can get around the Horseshoe as far as buying a meal. So I will tell you about the Grand Bazaar Shops. I'll tell you what they are. I'll tell you how Caesars is probably going to be doing away with them, even though they don't own them. And I will tell you how I feel about the Grand Bazaar Shops going away. And I think there's a good chance you have been to the Grand Bazaar Shops if you've been playing at the World Series of Poker since it moved to Horseshoe in Paris. This is really not being covered anywhere. Vital Vegas very briefly tweeted about it, but I did a long article about it. I believe mine is the only article on the web about the subject. The Wizard of Oz, which showed up at the Las Vegas Sphere in August, has been a huge hit, a gigantic hit. It is doing extremely well, and it may have saved the Las Vegas Sphere, at least for now. saved financially, that is, because the Sphere was losing a ton of money and really could not find a correct formula to succeed. They may have found it. I will explain when we get to that segment. Well, you might be listening to the show from Vegas. You might live in Vegas. We have a lot of Vegas-based listeners. And you might live in an apartment, condo, or townhome in Vegas. And if you do, or even if you did in the last 23 years, then you might have been overcharged by Nevada Energy, the only local utility company that provides electricity. You may have been overcharged by them dating all the way back to 2002. Yeah. So I'll tell you what you can do about it and how you can figure out whether you were a victim, because there were a lot of victims. I looked and I actually wasn't, but you may have been. Salt and Fin. What would you think Salt and Fin is? If it's a restaurant, which it is. What do you think Salt and Fin would be? Would you think it's a seafood place? Well, you'd be correct. It was. It was in the former Fiore location at Harrah's Resort Southern California, also known as Harrah's Rincon. It has closed. I will tell you the details about that. And I think I'm only covering this because of the stupid name Salt and Fin, to be honest. I think if it had a regular name, I probably would not do that segment. But just because it's called Salt and Fin, I'm going to cover it. So that's our agenda. I will get right to it. We're going to talk about the ESPN Bet situation because it's very strange. You may not have even heard of ESPN Bet, but I will explain it to you, what that is, and the weird saga behind it. And I will also tell you why we're doing the topic right now, because something newsworthy has happened with it that you may not be aware of. So, in 2018, in May of 2018, there was a very important piece of legislation that repealed a law that was known as PASPA, P-A-S-P-A. And PASPA was keeping legalized sports betting in one state and one state only. I'm sure you can guess what state that was. Nevada. That was the only place you could place legal sports bets in the United States. Didn't matter if there's a casino. There could not be a legal sports book anywhere else except Nevada. And that was all the way through May of 2018. And finally, that was repealed. And that was a long time coming. It was pretty ridiculous that you could only sports bet in Nevada. In fact, it was unfair to the other 49 states. And I can't think of any other federal law that restricts any particular activity to one state only. That's the only one, to my knowledge. Maybe there's others. I'm not just talking about gambling stuff. I mean, anything. So when that was repealed, that made it legal for the other 49 states to bring in sports betting if they wanted it. Now, plenty of states don't want it, but most of them do. And then, of course, they have to establish the regulatory framework and hand out licenses. So there's a lot to do. They can't just snap their fingers and turn on sports betting. But a lot of states have adopted sports betting, as I'm sure you have seen. California is not one of them. California, the most populous state in the nation by far, still does not have any kind of legalized sports betting or legalized online gambling or online poker, nothing like that. Thanks to the Indian tribes that are fighting with the existing card rooms that are non-Indian owned, like the poker rooms such as Commerce, The Bike, Bay 101. They're fighting with the Indian tribe who gets to control what, and they just can't come to an agreement. So this has been dragging for years and years and years. Anyway, there's a company called Penn Gaming, and they do have licenses to operate sports books, and they have been looking for ways to monetize these sports books better. And Penn Gaming, which is a large company, and in fact is publicly traded, Penn Gaming got the idea that if they were to brand themselves with Barstool Sports for their online sports betting operation, that it would attract a lot of new potential sports bettors. Now, what is Barstool Sports? Well, Barstool Sports was founded by a guy named Dave Portnoy, Portnoy. It was founded in 2003. And it was a brand aimed at young men, guys in their 20s and 30s. They took a very politically incorrect tone. They were just very brash and sometimes controversial. They were just a website. And eventually they spread out to become other things. And they actually had Barstool bars and other things around the country. So the brand grew and grew. But it was aimed at kind of like the young frat boy type. So you can picture the type of content they would put on there. It wasn't exactly politically correct stuff. Now, in the 2000s, that was fine. The 2000s, it didn't matter how offensive you were, as long as it wasn't like to a major, major extreme. So in the 2000s, nobody obsessed too much over sexism or things that are borderline bigoted or racist or homophobic. You know, all that type of stuff was not really worried about by most people, especially if it was done kind of in jest and in fun. And as you know, starting in the 2010s, things started to change. The culture changed, and a lot of jokes and comments you could make back in the 2000s, you can't make anymore. And if you try to make those type of jokes or comments, then a lot of people come after you. Now, Barstool, to their credit, they didn't change. Barstool is basically the same type of company. They still have the same type of attitude as they had back in 2003. With a little bit of change, but it's pretty much the same thing. And that has gotten Dave Portnoy in some trouble. And by trouble, I don't mean like any kind of criminal trouble, but I mean that there's been controversies surrounding him. Anyway, Penn Gaming partnered with Barstool. They made a very, very expensive partnership with them to basically take on the Barstool brand. And they did so by buying 36% of Barstool Sports for a lot of money. Now, how much did they spend? Well, for 36% of the company, they spent
$1 million.
No, they wish. They spent $163 million. Can you believe it? This was not a casino. It's not like they bought the Barstool Casino. Barstool did not have any kind of real assets that were worth anywhere near that. They were just a brand. But Penn bought 36% of them for $163 million, meaning the valuation of Barstool Sports based upon that purchase was 400-something million. It's crazy, right? But that's what they paid. And their idea was that they're going to get a lot of new sports bettors this way. That this is exactly the crowd they're aiming for. Young men in their 20s and 30s who like sports, who like drinking beer, who like having fun. And they thought this is a great idea because maybe they don't want the older married man who has to worry about his wife getting on him for losing money sports betting, or who has to worry about losing the money that his kids are going to need to go to college, or he's going to have to pay the mortgage and can't afford to gamble this month. They were thinking, well, we can get some young, carefree guys who are employed, who might have excess cash lying around because they don't have to support anybody but themselves. And these guys are very likely to be interested in sports betting if they're interested in Barstool Sports, because Barstool Sports is a company that kind of revolves around sports and entertainment. And it's a natural progression that these people probably like betting on sports too. That was what they thought. And yeah, the youngest of the crowd that follows Barstool, like college kids, they're not going to have much money to spend. But hey, look, these guys are going to get older too and get jobs. And then they'll have money to spend on sports betting too. So that was the plan by Penn Gaming. That was what they thought they were going to accomplish. They paid way too much money for it. Like, I don't even blame them so much for wanting the Barstool brand, but to buy 36% for $163 million was insane. And this happened in February of 2020. This was 21 months after the repeal of PASPA. Well, then less than 3 years later, they doubled down on it. In fact, they more than doubled down. Penn decided to acquire the rest of Barstool Sports for another $388 million, which made the entire tab for Barstool Sports $549 million. That is insane. That's crazy. Barstool Sports was worth nowhere near that. As I said, they had some Barstool Sports themed bars, and they had websites, and they had YouTube channels, so it wasn't worth nothing. And it was a somewhat well-known brand. In fact, they tried to even get into poker. They sent some Barstool guys to poker who, by the way, didn't fit in very well. They kind of just felt like if they showed up, that everyone in poker would think they were cool, but it didn't work. In fact, one of them got in some kind of Twitter flap with Alan Kessler, and everyone even backed Kessler there, which, you know when Kessler is the cooler one in the battle on Twitter, that you got problems. But people are like, who are you? Like, yeah, Kessler's got issues, and Kessler's kind of a weird guy, but he's one of us. Like, he's one of us. He's been around a long time. Don't just show up here in the community and start attacking Kessler. Like, that's not how it works here. That was pretty much how everybody took it. It wasn't even like a big deal, but they weren't welcomed very much in poker, the Barstool guys. I think we talked about this on the show before. Anyway, $549 million was the entire tab, and Penn fully owned Barstool. Dave Portnoy was swimming in money, literally swimming in it. He could fill a whole swimming pool of $100 bills, and probably it still wouldn't fit in there. $550 million worth. I mean, that was a lot of money. That was absurd money for a second-rate internet sports media outlet that's basically anchored by a few goofy personalities, Portnoy included. Things started to fall apart. First of all, the value of having Barstool as a brand did not really pan out. They probably got some extra people signing up, but it's not like they got a huge wave of new people that made their sportsbook way bigger than it was before. It's not like this $549 million they spent, that they were reaping back from all the extra business they were getting. They really weren't. I mean, it had a minimal impact. So that was the first problem, that it just didn't translate well. People weren't like, oh, okay, well, we love Barstool Sports so much, we're going to sign up for the Barstool Sports sportsbook and bet regularly. Like, it just didn't happen. But the bigger problem was that Barstool still hadn't changed since the 2000s. They were still operating like it was the 2000s. Dave Portnoy, who was still the face of Barstool Sports, even though he had sold it, he was still the face of it. He was not acting very different than he was before. And they kept getting into various controversies, including things that Portnoy had done before the sale that came back to bite him as people would dig up stuff online and say, oh, look what Portnoy said, look what he did. And it started to become more and more of a problem for Penn Gaming. Remember, which is that they have two issues they have to worry about. Number one, they're a publicly traded company. And number two, they are a licensed and regulated sportsbook. So they have to worry about two sets of regulators. And they have to worry that every time Portnoy or his gang does something that's controversial, that it could put either of these in jeopardy. So one of the controversies happened in May of 2023 when Ben Mintz, M-I-N-T-Z, who's known as Mincy, ended up in a controversy for using the N-word while reciting rap lyrics. And he wasn't using the word himself. He was actually rapping a real rap song and then just said the word out loud. and he's white, by the way. Now, Mincy is not racist at all. He's just kind of this goofy guy they keep around for kind of like comic relief. This is a very like non-threatening, goofy kind of comic relief dude that they have there. And he's the last one you would ever picture as racist. And he's not. So he was just being silly. And he didn't think about how you can't really do that anymore. So a lot of people started complaining on social media, which I thought was stupid, by the way, because it was clear the intent was nothing racist. This is where we have our oversensitive times. You can tell Mincy, hey, this isn't really appropriate these days. You shouldn't do this again. But he wasn't being racist, and everybody knew it. And in fact, the people complaining about it weren't black. The people complaining about it were all white. But some very pearl-clutching woke individuals complained about this and made a big deal about this on X. And there became a growing controversy about this. And then, of course, Penn Gaming found out about this, and they were furious. So Penn Gaming came down very hard on Portnoy. They said that their license was at risk for this, that they could get in trouble as a publicly traded company for having this type of thing go on. And they demanded that he has to fire Mincy, who Portnoy really liked. Portnoy didn't want to fire his goofy friend that had become beloved among the Barstool Sports fans. And by the way, of all the people from Barstool who entered the poker community, Mincy was the one who was best accepted. People liked Mincy. I liked him, and he even gave me a shout-out when I made it fairly deep in the main event that year in 23. Portnoy did not want to fire him, but he had to. So Portnoy had to fire Mincy over this. And there was a lot of bad blood over this on both sides. You could tell Portnoy did not want to do it, but he had to. And he was kind of speaking in code like, boy, I hate this situation. I hate having no control over my own company. And he had no control because he had sold the entire company to Penn Gaming. He made a shitload of money, but he was still the face of the site. He was still seen as the boss of the site, even though he wasn't. And he hated having to do this. There were also various clashes over Portnoy's behavior. And there were things that were brought up from the past where Portnoy had said a number of very controversial things back in the 2010s. And also he said some controversial things around that time as well. So things just kept coming up. And Penn kept saying to Portnoy, look, you got to stop. You've got to change. You can't act as if it's still 2003 and you own the company. You don't own the company, and it's not 2003. It's 2023. So shape up. And Portnoy kept raising the point, hey, you knew what you were getting when you bought Barstool. You were getting me and everything that comes with me. And I'm not a guy without controversy. I am brash. I say things that get people angry. And you knew that when you bought the company. So what are you talking about here? If you didn't want something like this, you should have bought a different company. You should have branded it differently. And he was right. I mean, when you're going to buy Barstool Sports for what it is, it's a site appealing to kind of the frat boy culture, to the masculine male culture who wants to sit there and joke around, not worry about being politically correct, drink beer, watch sports, gamble. That's who they're trying to attract there. And if you're going to buy a company that is aimed at that group, you can't get mad when the face of that company doesn't exactly have a pristine record as far as what he said and written on social media. So anyway, it started getting worse and worse. Penn Gaming looked at this and said, boy, we screwed up big time. We really, really screwed up big time. What did we do here? We spent $550 million on buying something that might be a net negative for us. It's a constant headache. We're constantly afraid of our license. We're constantly afraid of the SEC maybe coming down on us. And we're not even getting a lot of new business. In fact, some people were complaining that Barstool Sportsbook was crap. Some were complaining that they're restricting winning gamblers, that they only want losers there, that this is a disgrace to the Barstool brand. How could Portnoy be associated with this, where his followers are only welcome there if they are losing sports bettors, but if they are positive expectation sports bettors, then they're limited down to almost nothing. And people started making a big deal about that on X. This just was not a good partnership. This was a bad marriage. It really was. It's like two people get married, and you know from the start that they're just incompatible. Even though on paper they might be compatible, you can tell by their personalities that they are incompatible. You can tell by their interests that they are incompatible. And then sure enough, they start having fights. And sure enough, both of them realize this was not a good idea. So what happens in that type of marriage? Well, there's a divorce. And there was one. There was a divorce. So during the 2023 second quarter earnings call, Penn Gaming CEO Jay Snowden said, being part of a publicly held, highly regulated licensed gaming company, it became clear that we were an unnatural owner of Barstool Sports. And that's true. They were an unnatural owner of Barstool Sports. So they sold 100% of Barstool. This is in 2023. They sold 100% of Barstool Sports back to Portnoy for what was called a nominal cash payment. Now remember, they bought the site in 2 phases for almost $550 million. How much did Portnoy pay to get it back?
$1 million.
Good deal, right? To pay $1 million for something worth $550 million? No, he didn't pay $1 million. He paid $1. I'm not even joking. He paid $1. Why? Because they were just giving it back. The $1 was just so some money changed hands so it could actually be a sale. It was actually sold for $1. They actually handed it back to him. They're like, here's your Barstool, go away. Seriously. That's what they did. Now, why did they do that? Well, because they had another idea. They had another brand that they wanted to associate with, and they needed Barstool gone. It's much like if you're in a bad marriage and you meet another girl and you want to marry this other girl. And you go, well, crap, I can't marry this other girl while I'm married to this first girl. So you divorce the first one, and maybe if you want to marry the second one badly enough, you give the first one whatever she wants monetarily. And then you say, I'll only do this if you go away and never talk to me again. So that's basically what they did. They gave him Barstool back for free so he would go away. And so they could then partner with something else they felt made a lot more sense. So did Penn lose $550 million in this whole thing? No. Penn lost $800 to $850 million on this whole thing. I'm not sure where the other $250 to $300 million came in, but presumably this was on marketing or other expenditures while they owned it. But they made this claim themselves that they lost about $800 to $850 million on this whole partnership with Barstool. And they walked away with nothing. Very good. Very good decision making. By the way, I could have predicted this a million miles away. If they came to me and said, hey, Todd, do you think we should buy Barstool Sports and become the Barstool Sportsbook? I would say, no, that's a terrible idea. Do not become the Barstool Sportsbook. First of all, you're not going to get the business you think you're going to get. You may get a few dopes signing up who make a few low-stakes bets occasionally, but you're not going to make a lot of money from the Barstool following, and also the Barstool following is not as big as you think. And second, it's going to be a huge headache for you. If you're a publicly traded company, if you're a licensed and regulated sportsbook, you do not want to deal with Dave Portnoy and everything that's associated with him. And not that I got an issue with the guy. Like, I don't mind this stuff. He doesn't offend me. But I'm not a publicly traded company, and I'm not a licensed and regulated sportsbook. I'm just a dude. So I can look at Portnoy and say, okay, whatever. Like, I'm not a fan of his, but I don't mind him. But I can see why a company like that is not compatible with him. So anyway, what was the next move? And what does this have to do with ESPN Bet? Well, here we come. They offloaded Barstool, and they jumped feet first into another marriage. The new marriage, the new partner, was, you might be able to guess, ESPN Bet. Now, what is ESPN Bet? Well, it was actually ESPN, and it became ESPN Bet. So they partnered with ESPN. This was essentially a rebound marriage. Going back to that analogy, picture that you had a terrible marriage, you finally get rid of the first wife, you met someone else at the same time that you like a lot better, you think's a lot more compatible with you, and you think, oh, okay, now this is who I should have married in the first place. Okay, and then you just jump right into it, and you don't really think about anything. You just think, well, this second girl is different than the first girl. The first girl clearly was not compatible with me, but I got rid of her. This one's different, so she must be compatible. And you quickly come up in your head with reasons why you think she's compatible, and then you marry her. Right on the spot. That's basically what happened here. They decided that ESPN was what they really needed. They did not want or need Portnoy. They needed ESPN. And ESPN is very different than Portnoy and Barstool Sports. So they figured this time they finally had it right. ESPN would not embarrass them like Portnoy did. ESPN wouldn't put their license in jeopardy, nor crash their stock price with scandals like Portnoy did. They would not have potential SEC issues that could possibly be brought on by Portnoy's behavior. And perhaps most importantly, ESPN was a huge brand that goes back to like 1980 with a gigantic built-in sports-loving audience, many of whom are well-heeled and can definitely afford to bet with them. They don't have to worry about broke frat boys scratching up a few pennies to fire on NFL football on Sunday. They're like, this is what we need. We know ESPN is a very big operation. Barstool Sports, it probably wasn't as big as we thought it was. And the people they're bringing, they probably don't have much money to spend on gambling. And they were controversial. But ESPN has none of these problems. This is what we needed the whole way. Oh my God, we were so stupid. Okay, well, we're with the right one now. Now we found our soulmate. So they thought. So this was the reason that they jettisoned Portnoy so quickly. And why they gave him the whole thing back for free. For $1. ESPN was willing to make a deal, and they wanted it right then before ESPN changed their mind. So ESPN Bet was born. But how much did that cost Penn Gaming? Because remember, it's still Penn Gaming Sportsbook, just with a new brand. So ESPN Bet was the new brand. How much did they spend and give ESPN for this new branding?
$1 million.
Wrong again. Way wrong again. They agreed to pay $1.5 billion. Now, in a little bit of their defense, and I say a little bit because this was a very stupid deal, not quite as dumb as the Barstool deal, but still dumb. This was to be paid over 10 years. So it was $150 million a year. So basically, they agreed to pay $1.5 billion in cash to ESPN over 10 years and to grant ESPN approximately $500 million of warrants to purchase approximately 31.8 million Penn common shares. Remember, because it's a publicly traded stock. In return, ESPN would provide media, marketing services, and its brand. So that's why when you would watch ESPN, you would see at the bottom ESPN Bet right next to the ESPN score ticker at the bottom of the screen. That's why they were constantly quoting ESPN Bet odds when they would talk about games coming up. Or if you'd go on the ESPN app, you would see the ESPN Bet live odds there. They were constantly trying to put ESPN Bet in your face. So when you would think about betting on any kind of sporting contest, you'd say, oh, well, what about ESPN Bet? I keep hearing about this, and this is associated with ESPN. That must be good. I can trust them. And then you go sign up, and you don't even know it's Penn Gaming. You just hear ESPN Bet. You see it's advertised on ESPN. You think, okay, this is good. And you sign up. So that's what they were going for. And they put it everywhere. I'm sure you saw ESPN Bet if you watch ESPN at all over the last few years. The deal, which began in 2023, was, of course, to last 10 years, as I already said. So that would end in 2033. But there was an option. The option was that after 3 years, at the exact 3-year mark, that either side could terminate it if they felt it wasn't working out. So it didn't matter which side. If either side at the 3-year mark decided they were unhappy, they could just kill the whole deal. And it would be gone and there'd be no penalty. Even if one side still wanted to keep it. So that was the opt-out both sides had. But it would go 3 years without an opt-out. Well, let's do some math here. The deal actually began in August of 2023. So has it been 3 years? No, not even close. 3 years will be August 2026. But the deal between ESPN and Penn Gaming has just been terminated. Now, how's that possible? How has it been terminated if we're not at August 2026 yet? Did they borrow Doc Brown's time machine from Back to the Future and go to August 2026 and terminate it that way? No. The deal has been terminated because it was so bad for both sides that both sides decided, let's just get out, let's just be done. Yeah, so this wasn't a good partnership either. But what was wrong here? You could picture what would go wrong with Portnoy. But what went wrong with ESPN Bet? Well, Penn did pay ESPN Bet $150 per year. They paid it the first year, and I don't know if they get a partial refund. The deal is actually going to be terminated December 1st. It's already been agreed that it's going to be terminated. It just hasn't officially happened because we're not at December 1st yet. But in about 2 weeks, it will happen, and they can't undo it at this point. It's been agreed to be ended. And I'm not sure if they get a prorated refund of the $150 million they paid, or if they just are eating that, because basically they had fewer than 4 months of the second year. So they lasted together less than 3 years. They only lasted 2 years and 3+ months. When we get to December 1st, that'll be around that mark. Not very good. So why did this happen? I have to imagine that it just wasn't generating the money that Penn Gaming had been hoping. They weren't struggling with controversy like they were with Barstool Sports, but I just don't think ESPN Bet was bringing in the type of new traffic to their sportsbook, their ESPN branded sportsbook, that they hoped it would. And again, it's because people aren't that excited by brands when they go to Sportsbet. They really aren't. People just want a sportsbook that's easy to use, that they can get money on and off easily, and that they can bet on games with decent odds. That's all anyone really cares about. They don't care if it's associated with ESPN or Barstool Sports. Penn Gaming didn't learn from the first mistake. They were too obsessed with branding, when really they could be any brand. They could be just called the ABC Sportsbook. And as long as it's there and people are aware it's there in whatever jurisdiction it's in, then people will bet with them. You don't need to have any kind of slick branding. And I think that's what a lot of these companies that are currently offering sports betting in the U.S. do not realize, that people don't care about branding as far as online sportsbooks go, because you're doing it at home. It's not like you're going to a casino and you want it to look nice and you want to be around cool people and you want a fun atmosphere. None of that exists online. You're doing this in your underwear in your living room. So you don't care how cool the site is or what brand it is. You just want to get your bets down. You just want to bet on the game. And if you win, you're happy. If you lose, you're unhappy. Just like any kind of gambling. There's no additional element to it like there is in a brick-and-mortar casino setting. So that's where they made the mistake. And I could have told them that too. There was some value in having association with ESPN just because of the ESPN Bet being everywhere and that being a form of advertising, and people will go sign up for it and bet. So I'm sure they got some new business from this, but just not $150 million worth. So they wanted out. Now, why would ESPN want out, though? Because you can see why Penn Gaming would be unhappy. But why would ESPN be unhappy? They're getting $150 million a year. There's a few reasons why this can be. First of all, you have to figure out what ESPN does and doesn't want. ESPN is owned by Disney. And the Disney CEO, Bob Iger, has long been reticent to directly get involved in operating any kind of gambling platform. That's why there's no Disney casino. And there could be. Disney could at least associate themselves with a casino if they wanted to. But there isn't one, and there won't be. And the reason for this is that Bob Iger does not think that's a good look for the Disney brand, which I agree, actually. As much as I love gambling and casinos, I have to say that it doesn't really go well with Disney. So he's never wanted any Disney company directly involved with operating any kind of gambling platform. He was also worried maybe it'll create some regulatory issues for them as well that they don't want to have. So this was as far as they were willing to go, is brand an existing gambling platform operated by somebody else as ESPN Bet. But what does the average person think when they see ESPN Bet on the ticker at the bottom of the screen of ESPN? Well, they think that ESPN owns it, right? They don't bother to think, I wonder who actually operates this, though. Is it really ESPN or is it some other company? Let me look. Oh, it's Penn Gaming. Yeah, I've heard of them. Okay, well, good to see that Disney isn't operating a casino, because that would bother me. They're just putting their name on a casino. Okay, well, that's fine. See, people don't think that way. ESPN Bet makes it sound like it is ESPN Sportsbook. And Disney realized, this isn't that good for us, especially, and this probably wasn't related to it because I'm pretty sure this talk was going on before this scandal, but that NBA scandal we just talked about, that made them look a little bit bad by extension. People were laughing on X and other social media when they were showing screenshots of ESPN covering the NBA sports betting cheating scandal with an ESPN Bet advertisement on the bottom of the screen. So it's like, oh, look how bad it is that there's all these rigged sports bets. And by the way, come bet with us on ESPN Bet. You can get cheated too. Just like these people who got ripped off on the games that Damon Jones and Chauncey Billups told people insider tips so they could beat you. And just like the games that Terry Rozier threw on purpose. Yes, you can do that too on ESPN Bet. See, it made them look bad. So I think that ESPN was just getting tired of the whole thing, even if it wasn't from this scandal, which I'm sure probably really made them feel like they wanted to get out. I think they realized that if they're going to have something called ESPN Bet, they might as well just operate it themselves. There's not much difference in the public's eye. So ESPN didn't really like this either. They didn't want ESPN Bet anymore. They didn't want that brand anymore. And Penn Gaming did not want to fork over $150 million per year anymore. So once again, it was a bad marriage on both sides. And once again, they were happy to terminate it just abruptly and not at the time when they had talked about that one could opt out. They were both so unhappy that they mutually ended it effective December 1st, 2025. Is the story over? No. There's another rebound. Another rebound. Did Penn Gaming now rebound to a third brand? Were they that stupid? Well, fortunately for them, no. At least not yet. At least the third part is not about Penn Gaming being stupid. ESPN, they decided they're going to rebound. ESPN said, you know what? We don't mind being loosely associated with a gambling site. We just don't want the public to think that we're operating it. So we're going to do away with ESPN Bet, but what if we could be associated with a well-known gambling brand to where the public will clearly know that we have nothing to do with it? That'll be much better for us, right? So that's what they did. So their rebound after this divorce, and this is going to happen very shortly because December 1st is the effective date, their rebound is to DraftKings. So ESPN Bet is closing, and you don't have to worry if you have an account on ESPN Bet. What they're going to do is they're going to move ESPN Bet to one of Penn's other platforms called The Score. Now, you may not have heard of The Score. The Score is best known in Ontario, Canada, but it does exist in the U.S. as well. It is not a well-known brand, especially in the U.S., but it is a licensed and regulated book. And they're just going to transfer everything from ESPN Bet, which remember they operate, over to The Score. So really, the only difference is the branding. So your account will migrate over there, your balance will migrate over there, any futures bet you have will remain the same way. So for you, pretty much nothing's changed except the branding. ESPN Bet, though, will cease to exist as a brand. And then ESPN will start promoting DraftKings the same way they promoted ESPN Bet. It's just not going to be called ESPN Bet. It's going to be DraftKings still. They won't have their branding on it at all, ESPN. DraftKings products and services will be, quote, integrated with ESPN, according to the press release. And that'll start on December 1st, but the full rollout, whatever that means, will not happen until early to mid-2026. Now, how much is ESPN getting for this? Well, that was not disclosed, even in the press release. The press release, which was a week ago, says exclusive deal names DraftKings the official sportsbook and odds provider of ESPN, integrating innovative fan experiences across ESPN platforms, including ESPN DTC streaming service. Not sure what all that means, but we won't worry about that. It says ESPN and DraftKings today announced an agreement naming DraftKings the exclusive official sportsbook and odds provider of ESPN, effective December 1st, 2025. Now, what they mean by odds provider is that sometimes they'll say, well, here's the odds right now that this team's going to win. So let's say the Lakers are down by 8 in the fourth quarter, but they're up against a much worse team. They may say, well, right now the Lakers' odds of winning the game is this percent, or if you were to bet on it, it would be a plus 150 underdog. So things like that. And this is really just a way to advertise DraftKings. That's what the odds provider really means. Yes, they're giving information related to betting to the viewer, but it's really just a backdoor way of advertising. It says this agreement, which unites two of the most iconic brands in sports, will deliver fans premium sports betting content and experiences. Beginning in December 2025, DraftKings entertainment products will exclusively be integrated across ESPN's ecosystem with a full rollout expected in 2026. Fans will be able to enjoy betting features and access to offerings including DraftKings Sportsbooks, Daily Fantasy, and DraftKings Pick 6 at launch. Together, DraftKings and ESPN will collaborate to advance their shared commitment to responsible gaming by dedicating prominent assets to educate, raise customer awareness, and promote responsible play through campaigns and integrations. And that's a bunch of bullshit, but basically they're trying to say, we're going to be very responsible. You're going to lose your money very responsibly, guys. They're going to make sure that when you chunk off your paycheck to them, betting on sports with juice that's way too high, that you'll do it responsibly, okay? They're going to make sure of that. Jimmy Pitaro, chairman of ESPN, said, our betting approach has focused on offering an integrated experience within our products. Working with DraftKings, a leader in this space, will allow us to build on that foundation, continue to super serve passionate sports fans, and grow our ESPN direct-to-consumer business. We are excited about this new collaboration with DraftKings. DraftKings will also play a role across ESPN's digital platforms, it says. DraftKings will power the betting tab within the ESPN app, and their customers will receive special promotions for ESPN Unlimited, ESPN's newly launched direct-to-consumer product. Okay, so let me stop there. The rest of it's kind of fluff. Basically, what they're saying here is they're going to operate independently. You know, DraftKings is going to run DraftKings, ESPN is going to run ESPN, but they're going to have a lot of cooperations between the two. So the ESPN app will have special promotions for DraftKings. DraftKings will have special promotions for ESPN and their ESPN Unlimited thing they started. So basically, they're in bed together. That's basically what they're trying to say to you here, is that you're not going to be able to use DraftKings without seeing ESPN stuff, and you're not going to be able to watch ESPN without seeing DraftKings stuff. And that anything related to betting or odds is going to be, quote, provided by DraftKings. That's what you're going to start seeing on December 1st, and it's going to keep increasing until they have what they call the full rollout in early to mid-2026. Again, I don't know how much money is being paid to ESPN for this by DraftKings. I think ESPN believes that this is a better situation for them, because if it's ever accused that they are promoting gambling or running gambling, they'll say, no, we're not running gambling. We're not promoting gambling. DraftKings is a big company. They've been around a long time, and they're providing odds and other interesting information that people who watch ESPN or use our app want to know. And we're just two companies in a partnership. That's all. We're not operating any kind of gambling. So that's what's going to happen. Do I think that's going to be a success? Not really, but I guess it makes a little bit of sense. Like, I don't think DraftKings is going to get a big boost from this. I think, again, they're probably wasting their money. And I don't think that people are going to be real excited at DraftKings, like, oh, wow, as a DraftKings customer, I now get special deals for ESPN Unlimited. Like, most people are not going to care about that. I think a lot of these companies overestimate how much people care that they get some kind of special deal on some side product offered by a marketing partner. And that's basically what's happening here. But whatever. They'll probably stick with this for a little while. I don't think this is going to stick for the long term. I think eventually DraftKings is going to realize they're not getting good bang for their buck here, and they're going to separate again. By the way, if this story sounds familiar to you in some weird way, it's because we had kind of a similar situation here, right here on Poker Fraud Alert. Or shall I say the predecessor to Poker Fraud Alert. So in the 2000s, there was a brash, politically incorrect website in the poker community, one that broke the molds of common decency and politeness. A website where anything goes. A website where you could say whatever you want or be as offensive as you wanted. This was neverwinpoker.com. And if you were there, you know what I'm talking about. I did not start Neverwin Poker. In fact, I joined Neverwin Poker as a regular user in its very early days in May of 2004. But eventually I became a mod there, and eventually I was given a small percentage ownership. But in 2007, Neverwin Poker was bought by Poker News. And that was not a very good purchase for Poker News, because just like the thing with Barstool Sports, Poker News had to worry about the politically incorrect and controversial content causing them problems. And it did. So Poker News kept having to deal with the headache of Neverwin Poker. And they clashed with the head of Neverwin Poker, who was Brian Micon. They clashed with me too, but I was not the head of it and only owned a tiny piece by that point. So I wasn't the main one they clashed with, but they weren't very happy. And I kept wondering, like, what did they think they were getting here? They knew what Neverwin Poker was. I wondered why they bought it in the first place, but I thought they were going to just buy it and keep their hands off and just quietly collect money after monetizing it. But they wanted to integrate it into their offerings, and it was never going to work because they were two completely different types of sites. So sure enough, they decided they did not want Neverwin Poker anymore, and they gave the valuable parts of Neverwin Poker, basically the forum and the radio show, for free. They handed it off to me and Micon, is what they did. And they said, goodbye, get out. So we did. And just like Portnoy, we got it for nothing. We didn't even pay $1. And that's how the site Donk Down started. Donk Down was basically Neverwin Poker that had been ejected from Neverwin Poker, so they kept the domain with really nothing useful on it anymore. And we restarted everything over on donkdown.com. And at that point, I was a major owner. And then I had my falling out with Micon there in 2011, which I won't go over again. Most of you know about that. And a little less than a year later, I started Poker Fraud Alert in 2012. And here we are, almost 14 years later. So yeah, very similar, right? Where a company buys a politically incorrect and controversial company. They buy it for too much money, and then there's a culture clash, and then they basically give it away for free back to the original owners. Now, the one thing that sucks is I really didn't get much money out of the whole thing. I should have, but I did not get much money out of the whole thing for reasons I've discussed before. I won't get into that now. But in case you think I got away with big money out of that, I did not. I got very little money, sadly. If you wonder what Neverwin Poker is today, because remember, they still own the domain, or I think they did. Or I think they do. I don't know who owns it now, because if you go there, it's a weird Indonesian gambling affiliate. I tried to ask Chad Holloway at Poker News privately. I asked him, who owns this now? Like, did you guys sell it? And he said, I have no idea. And then he revealed to me that he wasn't even around back in those days. And I'm like, you know what? I never really noticed exactly when Chad Holloway came on the scene. He was just kind of there. And I think I just took for granted that he had been around. But I guess he hadn't been. I guess when he popped up in the early 2010s, he was new to poker. I knew he was younger than me, but
I was already 40 in the early 2010s, so he could be younger than me and still have been around for a while. But I guess he wasn't. So he told me in the late 2000s he was not around, and he didn't know any of this history. So he couldn't help me there, and he just did not know. So I actually tried to contact the current owner of Neverwin Poker, whoever it is, and sent them a message and asked, hey, who are you? What are you? And they have not responded to me, so I may never know. So that's the story of ESPN Bet. But it was more interesting than you thought, right? Well, since we were talking about a politically incorrect organization and owner, let's talk about another story like that. You may or may not be aware of a guy who calls himself Monarch. His real name is Ossi Ketola. Ossi is spelled O-S-S-I, and Ketola is spelled K-E-T-O-L-A. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, too bad. But Ossi Ketola, also known as Monarch, he runs an online casino called Duel.com, D-U-E-L.com. And he's made a lot of money. He's a young guy. I don't know how old he is, but he's a young guy. And he has made a shitload of money off Duel.com and other ventures in the gaming world. This guy's done very well at a very young age. However, Ossi Ketola is not very mature, to say the least. This is someone who made too much money at too young of an age and never really had to grow up. And that can be a problem. See, part of the growing up process, and I don't mean as a kid or a teenager, I mean when you're in the early 20s, you still have some growing up to do. And part of that process is kind of a humbling process that you find when you enter into the adult world, such as you enter a company as the low man on the totem pole, and you have to do what other people say, and you get consequences for your actions if you don't behave well. If you don't manage your money responsibly, you go broke. You start to learn a lot of adult lessons as a young adult, and eventually you mature. But if you're very successful from a very young age, and you just have gobs and gobs of money, well, there's really nobody making you grow up. There's nobody asserting any kind of consequence onto you for when you act inappropriately. And this can leave you in a state where you just never really mature and just don't really give a shit. And that can have some downsides. And he's now experiencing some of them, in my opinion. He became notable to poker when he started challenging people for these very, very high-stakes heads-up matches. The best-known series of matches he had involved Jungle Man. And Jungle Man just kept beating him. And they were playing for a lot of money. In some cases, they were playing for more than $10 million. I think one of them, Jungle Man, won like $15 million. I doubt that Jungle Man had all of himself. Jungle Man does have a lot of money, but I don't believe he has that type of money to risk on one heads-up match, even one where he's noticeably the favorite. Yeah, you never know what will happen luck-wise. In fact, I think in their series of matches, Monarch did win one, but overall, Jungle Man did extremely well. So he won a lot of money there for himself and his backers, whoever they were. And, if I could have backed Jungle Man there, I would have. I mean, obviously, he's a big favorite over just some dude who owns a casino and some gaming-related stuff. When I say gaming, I mean video gaming. Weirdly, Monarch also became obsessed with calling out scammers, kind of like me, except he's not the one you would expect to be doing it. He, this is like just a brash guy who doesn't give a crap, who just offends everybody, and he just doesn't seem like the type who's going to go on a crusade for what's right and wrong in the gambling world. But he got on this kick of calling himself a scammer hunter, and he was calling out people that he said were scammers. So, at first I thought, okay, well, that's nice. Even if he's a weird guy, even if he says and writes a lot of things that I would never write and I don't agree with, but, if he wants to call out scammers, that's great. But, because he's just seemed kind of immature, I didn't bother to even contact him and say, hey, I do the same thing. Someone was suggesting, why don't I have him on Poker Fraud Alert? And he may have been an interesting guest just because of his background. But I just wasn't very excited about it, so I just didn't bother to contact him. Then I heard he got banned from X. And I assumed, and I think I still assume, that he was banned for just very blatant racist language. He was using the N-word over and over and over again, just very blatantly. And when people called him out, he just kept doing it over and over, just like right in their face. And he didn't care. And a lot of people freaked out on him, especially people in poker. I think he wasn't used to poker being kind of different than what he was running with before. But, in poker, there's a lot of social justice types, and even ones who aren't social justice types, but who don't like reading that sort of thing, who get offended by that sort of thing. And when I see it, I don't get offended. And you say, well, of course you're not offended, you're not black. And okay, yeah, but I just don't get offended by language at all, even anti-Jewish language. I think the person's an idiot, but I don't go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm reading that. That's just not me. I just don't get offended by language. But I'm reading this, I'm going, this is just a very bad look. I don't know what this guy's going for. But he's in one way, it looks like he's playing these heads-up matches to market himself and Duel.com. But then what kind of marketing is it if you're just going to go drop N-bombs all over X? What's he even going for here? Because whatever he thought he was gaining from prominence in the poker community by doing this, by playing these nosebleed heads-up matches, he's just turning people off by talking like this. It was very weird. I just didn't quite get what he was doing. And then he got banned. And I've seen it happen before. I've seen it happen where people are arguing on Twitter or X, and then one starts lashing out into a lot of bigoted slurs against the other. And then all of a sudden, the one who's engaging in that language disappears and you see they're suspended. I think that just by some reports being made through the reporting system, that the bot will see this and just ban some people for it. Now, I also see things on X where I'm shocked that some people are just not getting banned, given how often they say a lot of the stuff they do. And I don't mean just controversial opinions. I mean, that's totally fine there. I'm talking about just blatant racist statements or language that they're just putting out there over and over and somehow never getting banned. But I've also seen people just vanish from the platform, both under the old ownership and Elon ownership, for repeatedly doing that. So that's what I assumed happened when Monarch got banned from X. In fact, I didn't even bother to talk about it on this show. I didn't even bother to post about it on the Poker Fraud Alert forum. I'm like, okay, immature young guy with too much money starts spouting the N-word over and over and just kept doing it more when people got mad and he got banned. Okay, that's kind of expected. See, when I got banned from X, there was no reason to ban me. I wasn't doing things like that. I don't use language like that, as you guys have seen. I was not breaking any rule there, and I got banned twice. I'm back on now, but I've gotten banned twice, once in August, once in September. And the August ban lasted almost the whole month. But with him, I'm I was expecting it. I wasn't surprised at all to see he was banned. Well, the reason we're doing this segment here is because Ossi Ketola has popped back up on X. And here's what he wrote. He posted this on a new account. Before he was at Monarch, exactly as it sounds. But now he's at Ossi Ketola with an underscore. It's not a new account. It goes back to 2023. So it must have been a backup account. He wrote, "Hi, I am Ossi Ketola, also widely known under my alias at Monarch. Recently, a criminal casino organization bribed a corrupt ex-employee to ban my personal account and all the accounts of my two companies with over 500,000 followers." Wow. Despite sending the appropriate requests to X through the official routes, all we have heard is radio silence for a month now. Now, I can relate to that. That's exactly what happened to me in August, where I kept filing appeal after appeal, and nothing happened. And I wasn't slamming them with appeals, by the way. I would send an appeal, and I'd hear nothing for a week, and I'd try again, still nothing. And you guys heard how I got back on. It was through somebody who knew somebody else in a high position there who was able to undo my ban. And then I still got banned again. What makes this even more absurd is that I bought my company handle Duel directly through an ex-employee, and I wired $300,000 for it directly to the ex-company. It's incredibly absurd that even after this, we are being fully ignored by them. Now, that part's interesting. In fact, that's the most interesting part to me. That he bought at Duel on X, so x.com/Duel, would bring you to the X account for the Duel Casino, which he owned. And that he talked about this, I don't know which ex-employee, but he discussed this with an ex-employee, in sales presumably. Hey, how do I get at Duel? And they said, well, it costs $300,000 and we can commandeer it for you and give it to you. And he said, okay, shot them $300K. And then they gave him the Duel account. And he said, that's been banned too. And they won't respond to him. So he's pissed off that he paid $300K for it. And then they won't even tell him why he can't access it anymore, which I agree is shitty no matter what the circumstances. I am making this post in an attempt to gain the attention of Elon Musk. Yeah, good luck. I understand that he's been working hard to crack down on the widespread corruption among employees on the platform, where they are taking bribes to ban and unban accounts. Now, we'll get to this in a second. You might wonder, is he onto something here? Did he really get banned due to a bribe? And is Elon really trying to crack down on this? I'll tell you what I know shortly. My banning has truly been a great misjustice and tragedy towards freedom of speech and integrity in the platform. I've been running my company for 10 years now, and I've been an avid fighter for freedom of speech, and I've been one of the biggest whistleblowers in the online casino industry, exposing the fraudulent schemes in this space. For this reason, I am a massive target of the, quote, casino matrix, and I am suffering a wide range of personal attacks from these fraudulent operators, including incessant and completely false allegations of pedophilia, scamming, and even murder from various accounts funded by rival casinos. Come on. I mean, do you think he's being framed for murder by rival casinos? Really? I understand that these people will attempt to get this account banned as well. For the bribed ex-reps reading this, prepare to lose your job once we get the higher-ups at X to get to the bottom of this. We have no limits when it comes to resolving this matter. He's warning the people who banned him at X. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. You watch. You watch. It's not over yet. You haven't heard the last of me. Okay, so very overly dramatic. But is any of this true? Now, I believe he spent $300K for the Duel handle, by the way. That I believe. I don't think he's making that up. And I don't think he's making up the fact that they're not responding to him. Because that happened to me. I fully believe he paid $300K for that, and I fully believe that he's been frantically trying to get a hold of them to at least tell him why this happened, and nobody's answering him. I'm almost 100% sure that part is true. But what about the rest of it? Is it really true that a criminal casino organization, that he won't name, by the way, which is weird, like if he knows who did it, why not just name them? A criminal casino organization bribed a corrupt ex-employee to ban his account? And to ban the Duel account and what other company he has? I don't know what the other company it is, but he said both his company accounts banned and his personal account. Was it really a result of a bribe from a competitor? I have my doubts. I really have my doubts. Now, what about Elon working hard to crack down on the widespread corruption among employees on the platform? Well, I haven't heard about that. What I have heard, and this doesn't have to do with bribery, is that Elon Musk has been cracking down since he bought X upon people that are secretly running the platform in a way that he does not approve. Like they're pretending that they're doing what he wants, but behind the scenes they're not. And they are unbanning people they like that Elon would never want unbanned. I'll give you a good example. I don't know if you're aware of Brian and Ed Krasenstein, but these are two sleazy guys. They right now are Democratic influencers with a large following on X. A lot of people on political X know who they are. They are two very short guys in Florida. They're either twins or brothers. I'm not sure. They look very much alike. The Krasensteins were banned, not by Elon, but by the previous regime. Why were they banned? Because the previous Twitter regime was very left-wing. So they obviously were not banned for political reasons. Well, the Krasensteins have a pretty ugly history They were previously involved in what's known as high-yield investment programs, which are very scammy. They had their home raided by the feds over this. And they also were squatting domains. They were just buying tons and tons and tons of domains that were similar to other domains, hoping to get traffic that's meant for other domains. They did a lot of shady stuff, let me just say. They were those type of people. Well, when they got onto Twitter, they had an idea. They said, we want to become influencers on Twitter, but we're not interesting enough to just become influencers on our own. And even if we were interesting enough, where do you start? How do you get people to notice you? So then they had a brilliant idea. They created accounts that were fan accounts for, I know one of them was for Justin Bieber, and I forgot what the other one was. But basically they made fan accounts for very popular celebrities. And they were covering these celebrities very aggressively. And they were able to get enough attention that way, and they racked up hundreds of thousands of followers. Now, you may say, what's wrong with that? You can start a fan club for Justin Bieber if you want on Twitter, right? Well, yeah, of course you can. The problem came when they abruptly switched from the Justin Bieber fan club to just their regular names and then just started tweeting political stuff. So the problem with this is they were manipulating the platform. They got hundreds of thousands of followers who were following them to learn about Justin Bieber, only to pull the rug out and suddenly switch to their own names and start tweeting left-wing political stuff. Now, you may say, well, what's wrong with that? Why can't they just change gears? They don't have to be a Justin Bieber fan forever. Well, the problem is because the way Twitter and X work is engagement leads to more engagement. So when people start interacting with your account, when you get a lot of followers, when you get a lot of replies, when you get a lot of engagement, then what you tweet shows up on more and more people's timelines, including ones that don't follow you. So it exponentially increases. That's how you will sometimes end up with viral posts when you don't have a big following. That's how you can sometimes see someone will have 3 million views on one of their posts, but they only have 300 followers. That's how it can happen. So they basically built up false engagement by pretending to be a Justin Bieber fan club. And then when they switched to their own names, this way, with this big following, then their political posts were showing up on a lot of people's timelines. And then they were making very provocative political posts that are going to get responses, like mostly angry responses from people on the right. And they got even more engagement. And all of a sudden, they're high engagement accounts. So Twitter didn't like this. The old regime of Twitter said, no, we're not allowing this here. This is abuse of engagement. And you're abusing our platform and you're gone. And Twitter banned the Krasensteins. Well, when Elon took over, the Krasensteins got unbanned. Now, why would Elon unban them for this? Well, he didn't. What happened was he had some employees that stayed behind that were very left-wing and pretended not to be. These employees figured that the only way that this platform is not going to become very right-wing biased very quickly is if they remain a wolf in sheep's clothing. If they pretend like they believe in Elon's vision of running the site, but secretly run it like old Twitter. So they figured, well, who can we bring back in order to balance a lot of the right-wing influencers that have risen in popularity since Elon took over and Elon stopped censoring them like the other regime was? Oh, the Krasensteins. They were getting a lot of engagement. So the Krasensteins were contacted and said, hey, we're going to unban you. Welcome back. Elon would have never wanted this. But someone did this who is a secret left-wing employee of Twitter that was doing things behind Elon's back. So Elon is trying to root out that sort of activity. And by the way, the Krasensteins are still there. Because I guess once they were back and they didn't break any rules, I guess Elon didn't care at that point. So they're still there. And they're very popular now. But that's what he's trying to root out, are the people who are remaining there just to thwart what they see as his agenda. But I haven't heard anything about Elon trying to get rid of corrupt ex-employees that are taking bribes. In fact, I haven't heard of any bribes going on. In fact, I'm going to ask Grok right now. So I just typed to Grok, have there been any ex-employees who have been caught taking bribes to ban or unban people? Let's see what Grok says back. Okay, well, according to Grok, this actually has happened. It says, yes, there have been documented cases and widespread allegations of ex-employees being caught and implicated in taking bribes related to banning or unbanning user accounts. The most prominent incident occurred in September 2025 involving a large-scale bribery network tied to crypto scammers. While X's official statements emphasize, quote, attempts to bribe employees for unbanning suspended accounts, multiple reports on X indicate that some employees accepted these bribes, leading to internal investigations and legal measures. Additionally, there are numerous user reports and specific allegations of bribes being used to ban competing or targeted accounts, often in the crypto space. These issues highlight ongoing concerns about the platform integrity under X's management. Okay, so I guess Ossi is right about that. I thought he was just making this up in his head, but I guess there really have been incidents within the last few months of people who have been banned or unbanned due to bribes. Interestingly enough, in this whole explanation from Grok, which I'm not going to read you can ask for yourself if you want, but it does not mention Monarch at all. But anyway, even with that said, just because he thinks that's what happened doesn't mean that's what happened. I mean, what if I said that? What if I said, the reason I've been banned twice on X is because of bribes that were made to corrupt ex-employees to get rid of me? Is it possible? Well, I guess, but do I think that's what happened? No. I think the bot banned me both times. In fact, the bot said it banned me both times. So I don't think anyone bribed anyone to ban me. Now, it's true that there would be more value in banning him and his companies than there would be in banning me. So I guess you could believe that a competing casino online could bribe X to ban him. But he doesn't provide any evidence of this, nor does he name the criminal organization. And most notably, and this is why I still don't believe that's what happened, this occurred shortly after he was dropping the N-bomb over and over. So it's not like he was a model citizen on X and then just one day everything's gone. Then I would believe him that he got banned because someone bribed. But here he was doing something to get banned. And I think what may have happened was that the rival casino companies reported him. And so, oh, we're offended by this. Oh, look at this bigoted language. Look at this hate speech. And then maybe it was the bot that looked and said to itself, oh, yeah, we see this many instances of using the N-word over and over in a short period of time. Yeah, let's ban this guy. And then he just can't seem to reach anybody now because it's pretty hard to reach anyone at X. I just got lucky that I happen to know somebody who knows somebody else there that took a look at my situation and unbanned me. I don't think that's what happened because he provides no evidence. He just noticed he got banned and assumed it had to be that, probably because he read these other stories in September about people getting banned and unbanned when corrupt ex-employees were bribed. Now, he says, my banning has been a truly great injustice and a tragedy towards freedom of speech and integrity in the platform. Well, I'm sure to him it's a tragedy, but look, when you're using somebody else's platform, then you have to follow its rules and its norms. Now, if you want to start your own platform, which he has, I mean, he runs his own platform, not a platform like X, but he has his own casino. He could start his own forum or some other form of social media, and then he could be as offensive as he wants. But when you're on X, if you're going to break the rules and keep using the N-word over and over and over again, and then you get banned, you can't say, well, this is a tragedy. No, you were taking that chance when you're using that type of language. And I'm not even commenting whether he should have been banned or not banned. I'm just saying that it's not surprising he got banned. I can't feel that sorry for those that keep challenging the status quo of the system. And then you get banned, like, oh, unfair. Well, then why are you challenging it like that? I'm the one who was banned unfairly. I was following all the rules. I wasn't doing anything that should result in a ban. And I got banned twice. I still wouldn't call that a tragedy or a great misjustice, as he calls it. It just wasn't fair to me. But here he was very brashly flaunting that he could speak like this And he didn't bother to think maybe Elon and the platform don't want that. So I understand why he's upset. Now, I will say that if he spent $300,000 on this dual account, which I believe he did, and they won't answer him, that's very bad. I'm fully with him on this. I did not pay anything for X aside from my verified blue check mark, which is like, $50 a year or whatever I paid. So I paid very little money to be on X. And I've definitely gotten my money's worth because I use it all the time. So I wouldn't go, oh man, they have to answer me because I spent $50. Now, it would be nice if they answered me. It sucks how you can't contact anybody. It's really shitty. But I didn't feel like because I spent $50 that they absolutely owe me an answer. If you spent $300,000, they absolutely do owe him an answer. And it is really crappy that whoever sold this to him, that they won't answer him either. They're just washing their hands of him. And I don't care how reprehensible his speech is. Now, it's fine if someone at X says to him, we don't like the way you were acting. It makes our platform look bad. We don't want this here. Get out. Goodbye. But if they do that, they should give him the $300,000 back. They really should, because they sold him this handle, and when they sold it to him, I don't believe it was made clear to him that if they just don't like the way he acts, that they can just ban him, and tough luck, and he's out at $300K. So they can remove him for sure, but to remove him and take big money from him that he spent to get a certain name on there is very unfair, and it may even be illegal. Illegal meaning civilly illegal. Like, I could see where he could sue them and win over this. If I were on the jury, I would actually rule that he would get a refund. Even if there was something buried in the fine print that they can ban him at any time for violation of terms of service, I just think that kind of thing is crap. I've always found it crappy when a company takes your money and then bans you without even any warning. Now, I think I'm warning him over and over that just because you bought that dual account here, that doesn't mean you can keep dropping the N-bomb here on the site. And if you continue, we're going to have to remove you and all your accounts and you get no refund. And if he just keeps doing it over and over and doesn't care and ignores the warning, then I would have a different opinion. But I don't think that's what happened. I think he just got banned because they don't really give warnings on X. I think he just got banned like I did, albeit for a very different reason. That's just not fair to do to him. They can't just decide they're going to take away what they sold to him for $300K. So I'm totally with him there, and he does deserve a response. And for them to not give a response to him is really lousy and is a borderline scam, even if it's not an intentional one. Now, will he be able to get the attention that he thinks he's going to get? I don't know. Because one problem with X is once you've been kind of neutered, it can be hard to get the word out enough. As of right now, he has 2,486 followers, which is less than me by a good deal. He had a whole lot of followers under his Monarch account, but this backup account has fewer than 2,500 followers. And it's now been 3 days. Now, 3 days is not a long time, but it's not like everybody is rushing over to follow him and take up for his cause. So it's very possible that X just thinks, you know what, screw this guy. He's not famous enough to make a big stink. And if we take away his main platform of speech, then good luck. Now, the next day, November 14th, he tweeted, "Beautiful, looks like my tweet hit a sore spot." Only 12 minutes after posting this tweet, the Luckyo co-owner, I don't know what Luckyo is, it's probably some competing casino, made a comment about us, quote, constantly crying about fake wagering data, when in fact this was the very first time I've ever made the particular statement about Luckyo. In his tweet, he was interacting with one of his FUD alt accounts where they were throwing around completely unfounded and unproven accusations of dual manipulating their wager volume. Oh, the irony. In a nutshell, Axe, which is, I guess, somebody at this Luckyo, is running a small army of dummy accounts with a couple of his goons where they come up with whatever accusations they can make about Duel. Sometimes it's about me burning houses. Sometimes it's about fake screenshots of, quote, official Duel emails where they inform users about their funds being confiscated. On top of this, they're paying pretty hefty price tags to various CTKOLs, I don't even know what those are, to blindly interact to promote their slander campaigns. God knows how far these people are willing to go, as my presence is an actual existential crisis for Lucky O. Best regards, the utmosteth Mauger, your favorite blue-eyed gamer, the SOL-sized Vesta Longer, Ossi Ketola. SOL-sized, I think he means a Solana, crypto Solana. I don't completely understand what he's talking about here, but okay. I don't know if he's trying to imply that they're the ones who did this. I don't know, but nobody's caring about this stuff. So he has 126 likes on this. Big deal. He has 2,300 likes and 433 retweets on his original tweet on this new account. But again, it's not like it's going like super viral. It's not like there's tons of people taking up for him. I don't think this is going to get addressed. Maybe he'll find someone to get it over to the right people, like I did, but maybe he won't. One who is taking up for him in the poker community is someone known as Limitless. Now, not Limitless from Poker Fraud Alert. We have a Limitless, that's Limit LES. I guess you could pronounce it Limitless also, but it's not the same guy. The Limitless or Limitless we have on Poker Fraud Alert is from Canada. This Limitless is from somewhere in Europe, and his real name is Wiktor Malinowski, and this is what he tweeted. I've known Monarch for years. He's one of the few people in this industry who's constantly exposing scams instead of creating them, unlike the rivals that paid for his ban. If his accounts were banned through bribed employees, that's a serious issue for the platform. I hope Elon Musk takes a look into this. Integrity matters. Well, again, where's the proof that this was done because bribery occurred? Looks like they're just guessing. Adam Levy, a.k.a. Ruthless, he responded, I'm happy he's exposing scams, but you can't freely use the hard R on here, meaning the N-word. Keep doubling down with it and expect there to be no repercussions. Highly doubt there was some sort of bribery, but more so countless TOS violations. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Then someone wrote, he's a complete scumbag, and so are you for defending him. Someone else wrote, motherfucker, stop defending that piece of shit. He's caused more troubles than being helpful. Someone else wrote, free Ossi. Someone wrote, limitless equals GOAT. Someone else wrote, don't worry, X does not give a single fuck. I think that person's the most accurate of everybody. X does not give a single fuck. I can confirm that. So, yep. When you get banned on X, and I know I'm not a good example because I've been banned twice and come back twice, but, I'm a special case. I'm a special guy. In most cases, if you get banned from X, you're gone. Very hard to come back. Very, very hard to come back from that grave. And I can tell you I would not be back if it were not for that stroke of luck. If it were not for that connection that I have, I would not be back. I tried to get back on my own. I didn't want to bother that person. And I did not get back on my own. They ignored me. And I hadn't done anything wrong. So I don't think he's coming back. And I don't think anyone bribed anybody. I just think he caused this himself and doesn't want to accept it. 775-FRAUD-55. Of course, you can only text that number now. 775-372-8355 is what you text to get a hold of me. Now we're at the portion of the show where we will talk about Vegas. Recently, what I've been doing is putting the Vegas topics together. So if you care about Vegas, we have them all here in one spot. And if you don't care about Vegas stuff, then you can turn it off and wait for the next show. But most people like the Vegas stuff because Vegas is central to a lot of what we talk about here. And a lot of my listeners like Vegas. A lot of my listeners go to Vegas. A lot of my listeners live in Vegas. So let's talk about Vegas. This story is not getting much attention, but I find it interesting, especially being a World Series of Poker player. Have you heard of the Grand Bazaar Shops outside of Horseshoe? You may or may not have heard of them, and it's possible you haven't heard of them, but you have been to them a lot of times and just don't realize what they're called. But the Grand Bazaar Shops are across the street, or kind of across an internal street, from Horseshoe. If you were to go to the valet area of Horseshoe and cross that internal road where you would drive in to have your car valet parked, you would cross over then into a little mini mall type area that borders eventually on Las Vegas Boulevard. But it's not really easy to see from Las Vegas Boulevard because there's a lot of temporary walls that have been erected there for whatever reason. But these are called the Grand Bazaar Shops, and it's a weird maze of different little outlets, mostly food outlets, but some other things too. And these are not owned by Caesars. They're not run by Caesars. They're not owned by Caesars. In fact, the land and the real estate and the buildings have nothing to do with Caesars. They just happen to be right across from Horseshoe. So they look like they're part of Horseshoe, but they are not. Now, if you've been to the World Series of Poker, you may have stumbled upon these, or maybe you heard about some of these quick food options that were over there, and you wandered over there and ended up at the Grand Bazaar Shops without even realizing what they were or what they're called. Or perhaps you took this weird escalator that's kind of by the check-in at Horseshoe that takes you up and over a little bridge, and then you come down and you're right where all these weird shops are. That's the same thing. The Grand Bazaar Shops are not part of Horseshoe, as I said, but they're right next to it. It's very strange. It doesn't look like it belongs there. It's very confusing. It is a little bit difficult to navigate. It's not a huge space, but it's a little bit weird. It has kind of a flea market feel to it. The name Grand Bazaar Shops, and that's B-A-Z-A-A-R, that's a good name for it. It kind of reminds me of a third world bazaar. Totally not what you would expect Center Strip, right in front of Horseshoe. And I'll explain shortly how that came to be, why that's there. But if you have been to places like Dave's Hot Chicken, Giordano's, Dirt Dog, Istanbul Mediterranean, those are all part of the Grand Bazaar Shops, as is the new bar called Ole Red, O-L-E Red, which you have probably seen if you've been to the area where Horseshoe is fairly recently. It's this tall building. I believe it's 3 or 4 stories. It says Ole Red on it, and that is something you can see from the Strip. It is a tall, multi-story bar. It tends to be crowded. It's doing very well. It's owned by Blake Shelton. It's based on one of his songs from the early 2000s. That is actually part of the Grand Bazaar Shops too, but that is the biggest thing there. Most of the shops are just very small outlets. Now, these are of interest to World Series of Poker players because these are food options to get things quickly and cheaply. Because as you might guess, given all the nickel and diming that goes on at casinos these days, the food in Horseshoe and the food in Paris is not cheap. In fact, it's quite expensive for what you get, to where even the fast food is expensive and often not even very good. So if you want to get much better value, you just got to cross that little internal road, walk out where the valet is, cross right over, and there you are. You can have Dave's Hot Chicken. You can have the shawarma or wraps there at Istanbul Mediterranean, which is decent. You could have hot dogs at what's called Dirt Dog. You could have pizza at Giordano's. And most of this stuff is pretty quick. So you can get this stuff quick, and it's not dirt cheap. Even Dirt Dog isn't dirt cheap. It's not like you're going to go, wow, this is so cheap, I can't believe it. But as far as to be in a strip casino environment, it is so cheap you can't believe it. It's way cheaper. You get way better value for your money at these little outlets than you do inside of Horseshoe. So these are just additional options you have for quick eats during the World Series. And by the way, like the 2 p.m. World Series events, there's no dinner break. So you have to grab something quickly if you want to eat. But even when you have a full dinner break of 60 minutes or 90 minutes during a World Series event that starts earlier, you still may not have time to go sit down at a restaurant, and maybe you don't want to. Maybe you just want to grab something quickly and then relax. This is where you can go for that. And the food is decent, and the prices are reasonable. So a lot of players at the World Series of Poker like the Grand Bazaar Shops, even if they don't know the name of it. So have I been to the Grand Bazaar Shops to eat during the World Series of Poker? Well, what do you think? Of course I have. You know I don't like wasting money. In fact, I'll tell you, the time I feel cheapest is when I'm at the World Series of Poker. I live so cheaply there, you don't even know. Maybe you do know. I really try not to spend money. I try to get comp rooms, even if I got to bounce around between hotels. I try to get cheap or free food as much as I can. I just spend very, very little money when I am there for the World Series of Poker. And there's a reason for that. It is hard enough to win at tournaments after you spend money on the rake and when you face a lot of good players like there are at the World Series of Poker. If you start piling on a lot of additional expenses to that, especially when you're staying for a lot of days, as I do when I play most years. Last year I hardly played at all, but it's because I had my trip in July. But usually I'm there a good deal of time, and it would really add up, the food, the hotels, and everything, if I was just spending normally. So I try to keep it as frugal as possible, so my expenses are very low for these tournaments. But a lot of other people have this feeling too, that they just don't want to waste a lot of money on very mediocre food from Horseshoe in Paris. Well, why am I doing this segment? I mean, this has existed for a long time, this Grand Bazaar Shops. So why is this something I'm talking about now? Well, the rumor, it has not been verified, but the rumor is that the Grand Bazaar Shops are going to be bought by Caesars and mostly dismantled. So to understand what's going on there and what will go on, if the rumors are correct, I have to explain what they are. What are the Grand Bazaar Shops and who own them? So if you go look at very old pictures of what is now called Horseshoe, back when it was called either Bally's or MGM Grand, because prior to the mid-'80s, it was called MGM Grand. Remember, it did have a big fire there in 1980 that killed 86 people. It was rebranded to Bally's in the mid-'80s, and then a new MGM Grand showed up in the 90s, which is what is still the MGM Grand today. Totally separate property further south. But it stayed Bally's for a long time until the Horseshoe brand occurred in the 2020s. And I've already gone over the reason for that. But anyway, if you look at these old pictures, where the Grand Bazaar Shops sit now used to be a parking lot. Just a parking lot. And that parking lot existed for a long time. And I'm not exactly sure of the history of that parking lot. But the parking lot had a separate owner from whoever owned the hotel. So this was never hotel property, that parking lot. There was not even a parking lot necessarily for MGM Grand / Bally's. This was just a parking lot that had separate ownership. I'm not even sure what it was used for. I wasn't even driving for some of that time, and then when I was driving, I just didn't pay attention to it. So I can't tell you much about that parking lot and when it stopped being a parking lot. But what I can tell you is this was never owned by that hotel, no matter who had ownership of that hotel, and no matter what that hotel was called. And to this day, that remains the case. So at some point, and I didn't bother to look at what point this happened. I guess I should have, but I didn't. But at some point, someone got the bright idea to do away with the parking lot and change it to shops that they could rent out, because this is prime space. This is right there on the corner of Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo Road. It's a very, very prime piece of property. So while they were not able to put up a competing hotel, there's not enough space for it, and they probably would have issues with the county to go do this, they were able to convert it into shops. And that's what they did. So this is a completely separate owner. It says on their website, the Grand Bazaar Shops is managed by ABV Harvest LLC, an affiliate of Innovatus Capital Partners LLC, pursuant to a sub-advisory agreement with Perella Weinberg Partners Capital Management LP, the investment advisor to the investment vehicles which own Grand Bazaar. If they're trying to confuse you as to who owns and manages it, they did a very good job. I have no idea what I just read you. If I spent enough time looking at this and deconstructing it, I could kind of figure it out, but I'm not going to. But as you can see, none of this is Caesars. None of this has to do with any other property Caesars has dealt with as far as buying the physical land of their properties and leasing it back to them. None of this applies here. This is a completely separate company that's, I don't know, managed an affiliate pursuant to a sub-advisory agreement, blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, it's a completely different company that owns it and manages it. The lot size is 88,000 square feet, which it doesn't look like that. It looks a lot smaller than that. The square footage of the actual Grand Bazaar Shops is 53,000 square feet, which still doesn't look that big. To me, the whole thing seems kind of cramped. But whatever. It says it's 2 floors, but I don't really understand that because there really aren't 2 floors to this. Everything is 1 floor, except for Ole Red, which is like 3 or 4 floors. So that doesn't make a lot of sense either. It does say there are 11 buildings. And I guess they do own some kind of parking lot, though I don't know where it would be. It says parking space is 462. I don't know. I don't really know where the parking lot would be there. I think that's not correct anymore, but whatever. They have a website if you want to check all this out. That is Innovatus, that's INNOVATUSCP.com. Innovatuscp.com is where I found this. They describe the different shops over there. There's actually a lot more than I even realized. There's like a ton of them listed. The ones I know best are Istanbul Mediterranean, Dirt Dog, Giordano's, and Dave's Hot Chicken. But there's a lot of other stuff they have here. Some things are not food related. One thing notable that is there that I didn't realize was there is Tix for Tonight. Tix for Tonight is one of those discount ticket brokers. You can get cheaper tickets to shows through that. The 2 biggest things there are Ole Red, which I've described before, and something called Bottled Blonde. Bottled Blonde is described as, quote, get ready for an unforgettable night at Bottled Blonde, the hottest spot on the Las Vegas Strip. And spoiler alert, it is not the hottest spot in the Las Vegas Strip by any means. With high-energy vibes, massive LED screens, and an open-air beer garden atmosphere, we bring the perfect mix of nightlife and entertainment. Whether you're here for a wild weekend, a bachelorette bash, or just looking to party in style, our signature cocktails, craft beer, and elevated bar bites set the stage for an epic time. Okay, let me give you a reality check here. From everything I'm hearing, this place is dead. So, as well as Ole Red is doing, that place is jumping. Bottled Blonde is pretty dead, according to people on X and people I've spoken to. So I don't know how long they're going to be around. But the reason I'm mentioning Bottled Blonde is because they figure into this story, as does Ole Red. So Caesars, according to Vital Vegas, and this is from him, he's pretty good at getting the scoop on these things. And I've had some issues with him recently, as I've talked about on the show here, but I will tell you, he is pretty good at getting gossip that's usually correct. Sometimes he's wrong, sometimes he's right at the time, but it turns out not to be true later on because things change. But he doesn't just post bullshit. Usually he posts things that he believes are credible, and he's pretty good at judging what's credible and what's not. So he wrote, great news, Caesars is poised to buy out the flea market operator and kill off Grand Bazaar Shops. Ole Red and Bottled Blonde stay, but other leases won't be renewed. Along with Dre's closing and the ousting of timeshare hawkers, great moves to improve the Las Vegas experience. So he doesn't like the Grand Bazaar Shops, but that's because he lives in Vegas. He doesn't play the World Series of Poker. He doesn't spend any time at Horseshoe. So for him, it's just like a blight. He doesn't like it. He thinks it doesn't fit in. It's annoying. It's cheap looking. It's weird. He just doesn't think it should be there. And he compared it to the timeshare hawkers, the people who stand around on the strip and try to get you to buy timeshares or go to timeshare presentations. And he also mentioned Dre's closing. Dre's is right above the Cromwell, and that's going to finally go away. And that's been the bane of the existence of those who stay at the Cromwell, as it's very noisy. It's an after-hours club that's existed for a long time. So he likes the fact that all that is going away. Now, I don't agree with him about the Grand Bazaar Shops. I couldn't care about Dre's or the timeshare hawkers, but the Grand Bazaar Shops are very useful if you're staying at Horseshoe or if you're playing the World Series of Poker or both. because it's value food. You have a number of additional food choices which are good value. And the truth is, the food choices at Horseshoe kind of suck, especially the fast food options. But let's focus on what he said. He said, Old Red and Bottled Blonde stay, but the other leases won't be renewed. So upon reading this thread and just figuring some things out for myself, let me tell you what this is happening here, what's going on, if this is true. This is not verified by anybody. This is just a rumor from Vital Vegas, but I believe him. I think this is right, but I just can't present you any proof of it. It seems that Caesars has finally realized that this is not good for them, that this is not something that they should just allow to be there, and that they should make some effort to take control of it. Now, they can't force control of it because they don't own it, and they just don't have the right to commandeer it. They can't just say, well, eminent domain, we're taking this over. They can't. They're not a government organization. They can't forcefully take it over. But they can make an offer that the current confusing ownership of the Grand Bazaar Shops can't refuse. This innovative CP and all their affiliates and sub-affiliates and management and all that crap. What if Caesars made a very, very lucrative offer to them to sell them the space and to make them the landlords? That is what I am hearing is going to happen. That Caesars is just going to buy it out. Now, when they buy it out, what are they going to do? Just shut down the whole thing? Well, yes and no. So Caesars is in the discussion phase. They have not purchased anything yet, but they're in the discussion phase with this independent owner to buy the whole thing out and take full control of it. But all of these shops have leases, and it's not so simple to just buy it and say, well, we're wrecking this whole thing and putting something else here, so get out, your lease is over. They'll run into all kinds of legal hot water for doing that, because when they buy this, then they become the new owner. And if they just violate the leases, there can be all kinds of legal trouble for them. So they're not going to do that. So apparently what they've decided to do is buy the space and then honor all leases. And each time a lease expires, then they are going to not renew it. This is true for Giordano's. This is true for Dirt Dog. This is true for Istanbul Mediterranean. This is true for Dave's Hot Chicken. This is true for Ticks for Tonight. This is true for everything, apparently, except for Old Red and Bottled Blonde. Now, apparently, some of these leases are pretty long. So this is not like when you're leasing an apartment and at most you have a 1-year lease, and if it doesn't get renewed, then at most you have a year from today to live, and probably less. Some of these leases are multi-year, from what I'm hearing. So it's going to take a few years to get this done. You also may notice that there are some empty storefronts at the Grand Bazaar Shops. Now, that might be by design. It's possible that this has been discussed for some time, and that Caesar said to them, in the meantime, while we're negotiating this, do not rent these spaces out to anybody, because it will be a new headache for us to get rid of them. So it's actually more valuable to us to have no tenants. But we understand you have tenants with leases that are lasting a few years. So, okay, fine. We will honor all those leases, but definitely don't hand anything out that's new. So usually when someone buys commercial space like this, they want full tenancy. It's crappy to buy something with tons of empty space. That means that you don't have a lot of businesses that want to set up shop there, and you're not going to collect rent. But this is the reverse, where Caesars actually wants it all to be empty. So they want to buy as many empty spaces as possible, and maybe they've instructed the current owners not to rent anything further out while this is being negotiated. So that may be why there's more and more empty spaces there. But apparently the plan is to just not renew anybody whose lease expires. So whenever their lease happens to expire, they will be gone. I don't know who has the leases that expire latest and who have them that expire earliest, but no one's going to get renewed except for Old Red and Bottled Blonde, according to this current rumor. Now, why are they keeping Old Red and Bottled Blonde? Well, Bottled Blonde, I don't know if it's going to even last, because what I've been reading, it's not doing well. It may just go away on its own. And if Caesars does buy it, and Bottled Blonde says, hey, can you just let us out of our lease because we're not going to stay for any longer? And it's possible Caesars will just say yes. Old Red is doing very well, and Old Red is very popular. I think that Caesars is fine with that still being there because they probably feel that people like it and that they don't mind renting out that space and that it enhances the property and it's not an eyesore. It's not weird like the rest of it. And you can see it from the Strip. It attracts people over there. And then people will walk out of there and maybe walk into Horseshoe from there. So they probably don't mind having Old Red there. Why they want Bottled Blonde, I don't know. Maybe they like the theme of it and they think that fits with what they want to do as well. But everything else they want gone. They don't want these shops there because these shops, number one, compete with their own restaurants or their own outlets. And number two, the whole space is just kind of weird. It's this weird, ugly, maze-like mini mall type thing that has been compared to a flea market. And I mean, that is a pretty good comparison. I hate to admit it. I like the place. I like the fact that it exists, but I see why it doesn't fit. It really does not fit for Center Strip right there on Las Vegas Boulevard. So I see why they want to just wreck all of that. And they can easily do it because Old Red is all the way on the side, right up against the Strip. So they can wreck everything and leave Old Red where it is. And I'm forgetting where Bottled Blonde exactly is, but I think that's off on the side as well. So that's the plan at the moment, supposedly. Now, this could change, or this whole thing could fall through, or maybe Vital Vegas heard the wrong information. But I believe it. It all makes sense. I always wondered, why Horseshoe/Caesars is not attempting to do something about this. Even though, again, I like it, but I was surprised that they were as open to having it there as they were. So apparently they're not. Now, what are they going to do with the space? Well, first of all, you have to wait a few years until everything disappears. Once everything gets closed, then they're just going to wreck these buildings. And they're going to build something completely new in that space. It's not going to be a parking lot again. But they will build something new that they feel fits in better with what they have, and at that point, they will promote whatever is there. It is possible that they will rent the space out to other tenants that they feel fit in better with the theme of the property and with the location of Center Strip, something like Old Red. Like, you see Old Red, you don't think, oh, what's this doing here? That totally makes sense. That's something that has a theme to it, is unique looking. It has a lot of elements to it, even though there's a number of locations, most of them in the south. It's something that you can totally see on the Strip and not feel like it doesn't belong there. But these little restaurants, these little outlets, like this Istanbul Mediterranean, you just go up there and they, it's a little stand where they give you shawarma and falafel and chicken and wraps and bowls, and it's just a little thing operated by a family. So how does that fit in Center Strip? It doesn't. So all that's going to be gone. The whole thing's going to be wrecked, and they're going to put something there. Maybe their own thing. Maybe they'll lease space to big things that make more sense there. But that is the plan. So within a few years, you're not going to have these food options anymore at the World Series. It's going to be gone. The Horseshoe itself has pretty bad food options. Paris is a little bit better. It's not great, but it's a little bit better because they have that section you walk through that stretches from the World Series, between the World Series and the casino, that has at least some places you can stop and eat. But Horseshoe really sucks. Horseshoe, they have this one place called Nosh that's supposed to be a deli, and they actually have the nerve to post a picture of a very appetizing-looking pastrami sandwich. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with the Nosh Deli and their pastrami sandwich? Well, because they don't actually have pastrami at the Nosh Deli. In fact, they don't have anything deli-like. They don't have any deli meats. There's no deli offerings at the Nosh Deli. What they do have is a lot of crappy sandwiches, pre-made sandwiches that they stick in the microwave for you. I'm not even kidding. That's what it is. It's awful. I went there once, it was terrible, I never went back. So that's their supposed deli. And what's too bad is there once was a very good deli, a real deli, that was in Bally's that they did away with. Not in nauseous spot, but it was there and now it's gone. If you go down to the basement area, where you actually take a down escalator from the casino, there are a number of fast food outlets, but they don't take rewards credits, and they're very expensive. They're way marked up. Most of them are not very good, and the value for money is terrible. Then you have Guy Fieri's Flavor Town, which is awful. Go read the reviews on that. You're not going to believe it. Flavor Town is a misnomer, I'll just tell you that. And the weirdest thing that's going on in Flavor Town is that the service is super slow and the food comes cold. So you're thinking, like, why don't they just bring it to me sooner? Because obviously the food got cold, so it's not the kitchen is very slow making it. Well, they might be that too, but obviously some of the slow time in getting the food is it just sitting out and getting cold. So why don't they just bring it to me earlier? Then it'll be hot and I'll have it faster. But you'll see review after review after review complaining the food comes cold, the service is very slow, they get things wrong. Even when everything else is fine, it just doesn't taste very good. It's just awful. And it replaced a decent bar/restaurant there. But Caesars loves its celebrity chefs, and Guy Fieri, unfortunately, he's the worst of them. Most of his places suck. But Flavor Town is the worst of the bunch. So that's not really viable. There's the Jack Binion Steakhouse, which is fine, I guess, but it's not something you go to for a quick meal by any means. And that's pretty much it. There's no cafe there. Remember the 24-hour cafes that were like in every single Vegas property? Yeah, those are gone now. So the food situation at Horseshoe really blows, and it's much worse once this is gone. So this will be an unwelcome change in the late 2020s, early 2030s. Probably late 2020s. I'm guessing by like 2028, this will happen. Maybe 29. And there's a good chance that a lot of this will be gone by 27. Bottle Blonde was actually a $50 million effort. So if they're not doing well, they're really taking a bath. I'm not sure why Old Red does so well. I mean, I kind of understand, I kind of don't. It does have kind of a unique look to it. It's kind of cool looking. It's this tall red bar, multi-level bar that's you can see on all 3 floors or all 4 floors. I guess it's 3 floors plus a balcony. But you can see people up there, so it looks like everybody's having fun. It's got a country theme to it. These have done well in other cities, and it has continued to do well in Vegas. So that's been a success. But Bottle Blonde has not. And it kind of makes sense. It's more generic. Old Red is more unique. Old Red actually has a picture of a red dog on the top. And if you don't know the song, you probably wonder, like, what is that? Why a red dog? I mean, yes, it's called Old Red, but why a red dog? The song from 2001 by Blake Shelton, it was a popular song at the time. It told a story about a guy who ended up in prison because he found his wife with another man and beat the guy up badly. Maybe even killed him. I forgot, but whatever it was. He attacked the guy his wife was having an affair with. And then he ended up in prison, and he sucked up to the warden to make his life easier there, to where he got to take care of the warden's dog, who was this red dog that had a talent for tracking down any escaped prisoners. So every time prisoners would escape, they would send out Old Red, as they called him, and Red would go track down the escaped prisoners by sniffing where they had gone, and then the guards would come and capture them. So this guy wanted to escape in the song, and he came up with a plan that he had his friend or cousin bring a female dog when he would go take Red out for his daily walk. He would let Red spend time with his female dog and got Red very used to it. And then the plan was that when it was time to escape, that he would escape to the north and his friend would leave the female dog south where they always had them meet up. So instead of running to track him down, old Red would go run to the female dog the other direction. And the guards would be all confused. They think they're tracking the escaped prisoner, and they'd get there and they'd just find two dogs having sex, as they depicted in the video. And the final line in the song was, "Love got me in here and love got me out." Love meaning the two dogs at the end. That was the story of Old Red, and they built bars around it. It's been very successful, so good for Blake Shelton, who has a ton of money. He is married to Gwen Stefani, and there are rumors that the marriage is not going well, that they're just drifted apart. Not even like they hate each other or anything. They just have drifted apart and are not spending much time together. There's rumors that they will be getting a divorce soon. Of course, both of them have a lot of money, so I don't know who has more. I actually think Blake Shelton may have more. But they've only been married for 4 years. He's a lot younger than Gwen Stefani. Gwen Stefani is 7 years older than Blake Shelton. She is 56. He is 49. If you want to text me, 775-372-8355 is the number. Let's talk about the Las Vegas Sphere. The Las Vegas Sphere has been a success from the standpoint of what the public thinks of it, but has been a financial failure. It has been a major financial failure, and many people don't realize that. The Sphere has become an iconic part of Vegas. It very quickly became an iconic part of Vegas. People go out of their way to see it. People are fascinated by it. People think it's cool. The word of mouth about the Sphere itself is good. But unfortunately, that does not translate to money. If you're like me, when you've been to Vegas, you have probably put out some effort to see the Sphere. Maybe you've gone on the high roller at the Link, and you get a very good view of it from there. By the way, if you're diamond or above, every calendar month you get 2 free tickets to the high roller. And in fact, you can make that 4 if you go at the end of the month, and then you're there at the beginning of the next month. I did that with my parents once to bring them onto the high roller for free with me. But you get a very good view of the Sphere from the high roller. But if you don't go on the high roller, you can also go to the top of the Harrah's parking lot to see it. You can also just go on foot. It's kind of near the Wynn. You can just drive by it. And you can see it from various other spots in Las Vegas, including certain hotel rooms. But you probably made some effort to take a look at it, and you probably thought it was pretty cool. If I asked you, do you have a positive or negative opinion about the Sphere, you'd probably say positive. But if I asked you how much money you've spent at the Sphere, then I'm guessing for most of you, the answer would be
0.0.
And that is because unless you go inside the Sphere and go to one of the expensive shows there really isn't money to spend. There's not really a cheap or mid-grade option there. You're either spending a lot of money in there for one of the shows, or you're just not spending money at all. So you just looking at it is not going to make them any money. You thinking it's cool is not going to make them any money. They do make some money on advertising, but not that much. Kamala Harris infamously spent $400,000 of her campaign funds on an ad on the Sphere. That did not work out. People kind of mocked that. Can't believe that campaign spent $1 billion and got the results they did. But she was not a good candidate, so not that surprising. But they just are not bringing in anywhere the revenue they need. They have been losing a lot of money. And yeah, they have shows there that are successful that people will go to and spend a lot of money. They had their movie for a while, Postcards from Earth. And that could have been something that would have been very successful, but they screwed it up. When I say they, I should really blame the filmmaker. The filmmaker is a very left-wing guy who's an environmental fanatic. And the first 20 minutes of Postcards from the Edge are very beautiful. It's basically just showing you a lot of landscapes around Earth. And it's very well liked for the first 20 minutes or so. Everybody loves it. But then after that, it abruptly changes course and they stop showing you all these beautiful landscapes, and it becomes this very depressing and preachy environmental lecture about how humans are ruining the earth. Now, is that what you want to pay a lot of money for? It was like $175 per ticket to see this thing. You spend all that money and you get lectured about humans ruining the earth? Like, that's just not the time and place for this. If the guy wants to do a special on PBS, that's fine, but for people to spend so much money to see what they think are beautiful landscapes of Earth, and then they get to see that, and it's done very well for the first 20 minutes, and then it changes course, and they walk out feeling depressed, that's not a very good show. So the word of mouth was not very good. So that was not generating anywhere near the revenue they thought it would. And I'm telling you, it would have done extremely well if they just stuck to the script. If they just stuck to what they were doing for the first 20 minutes and then kept doing it. Because there's a lot of landscapes on Earth that they could have filmed and shown. And if they stuck to that, then I think they would have had different fortunes, but they didn't, so their fortunes were not good. So that didn't do very well. The concerts, yeah, they would do well when they're there, but no concert was there for very long. So it was just losing a fortune. There was talk of bankruptcy. There was talk of selling it if anyone would buy it. It seemed like the Sphere was headed for the toilet. It really did. It really seemed like this was an epic fail financially, and it just was not going to be able to sustain itself. I'm not sure what was going to happen to it if it did completely fail, but it was not working out. And then they stumbled onto something. And a lot of times the best ideas in businesses like these, in entertainment, a lot of times the best ideas can be ones you stumble upon rather than ones you plan. Let's go back close to 30 years. Do you remember Titanic? I'm sure you know that Titanic was an immensely successful film. In fact, it was the most successful film of all time by a wide margin by the time its run in theaters was over. But what you may not remember was that Titanic was forecasted to be one of the biggest flops of all time. It was thought to be an embarrassing failure. And the reason it was thought this is because it had all kinds of problems during production. There were delays. It was supposed to be released in the summer, and it was not ready, and it couldn't come out till November. So that hurt it, so they thought. And it was over $200 million to make, which in the 90s was huge. And they thought, very few films at that point had made that much money. So how are they possibly going to make that much here, not even releasing in summer? Like, how's this going to ever break even? So it was thought this is going to be a disaster. There also weren't any kind of huge stars in it. It was very special effects heavy. There was some criticism, like the special effects are going to be cheesy, and that it's taking so long because they're not working out well, and that the filmmakers are unhappy with it. This was thought to be a major disaster in the making. And I thought it was too. I'm talking about before I saw it and before it came out. I believed this was going to be a gigantic flop and an embarrassment, something everybody would laugh at for years to come. But that's not what happened, right? It was huge. It was incredibly successful. So what was the difference? Why did it do so well? A little of it was that the special effects were very good for that time. So it was very beautifully shot. And from that standpoint, it was a very good film. But that's not the reason it did so well. They stumbled onto something accidentally that they did not think of. They did not realize that the target market they accidentally created was teenage girls and young women. They didn't think of that. That's not who it was made for. I'm not saying it wasn't made for those people, but it was not aimed at teenage girls and young women. But teenage girls and young women absolutely loved Titanic. They loved it. And they came to see it over and over and over again. And you might remember some teenage girls or young women that you knew at the time in the late 90s that went to go see Titanic in the theater like 18 times. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, they really were girls, a lot of them, not just some outliers. A lot of girls who were going there in the theater more than 10 times to see Titanic. So how did this happen? Well, first of all, they loved Leonardo DiCaprio. Not only was he good-looking and young, but he had this kind of a non-threatening look and demeanor to him, to where they pictured him as the perfect boyfriend they would love to have. And they loved the sappy love story that was attached to his character.
Jack, I want you to draw me like one of your French girls. Wearing this.
All right.
Wearing only this.
So the whole thing just really, really, really appealed to teenage girls and young women in the late 1990s. And they kept going and going and going, and that's who drove Titanic to be the massive success it was. And that was not intended. It just happened. Well, then they realized, well, this is an untapped market. We forgot about teenagers. Teenagers aren't rich, but movies aren't expensive. Teenagers have time to do things like going to movies. And teenagers can get money from their parents to go to movies at any time. So if you can make a movie that's popular with teenagers that they come back to see over and over, or at least ones that a lot of teenagers come see, well, then you can do very well. And that's why there were a lot of teenage-aimed movies after Titanic, even ones that have nothing to do with the subject matter of Titanic or that aren't similar to Titanic, but ones that are aimed at teenagers. That's where there's a big glut of movies that came out at the time that were aimed at teenagers and young adults exactly for that reason, because they accidentally stumbled upon a segment of the population that could make a movie a hit very easily. Have kind of a similar thing going on YouTube involving kids. A lot of the most successful channels on YouTube are aimed at kids. And when I say kids, I mean sometimes young kids, sometimes I mean like tweens or early teens. But look at Mr. Beast, for example, who's probably the most successful YouTuber ever. He's not aimed at older people. He's aimed at kids and teenagers mainly. So that's who does well. And on YouTube, it was that, who has the time to sit around watching YouTubers all the time and getting a favorite YouTuber and just watching everything they do? Well, kids do. So again, that was something that was stumbled into, that if you have a YouTube channel that appeals to kids, you can blow everybody else away. You're going to do way better than channels that are aimed at adults. I know we're getting off topic a bit, but let's get back to the Sphere. So what did the Sphere accidentally stumble into? They stumbled into nostalgia. So simple, yet so overlooked. Gen Xers, such as myself, and boomers, such as a lot of this show's audience, love nostalgia. They love revisiting things from many years ago that at one point gave them pleasure. And if you can find something that is nostalgic and bring a little bit of a new take on it and present it well, then the Gen Xers and the boomers will pay for this, and they'll pay a lot of money for this. And it should have been obvious to them, because even a lot of their concerts were aimed at nostalgia. Acts that hadn't been all that relevant in quite some time, but that people remember and they come see. And not just the Sphere. Like, look at all these acts that are making a lot of money these days, where tickets are super expensive, where the performers are now very old. They're not going to put on the same level of performance they put on 30 or 40 years ago. But yet the tickets are way more expensive today than they were 30 or 40 years ago, even inflation adjusted. And that's because of nostalgia. Because you want to feel like you're back in time. You're back in those days again. You're reliving something you once enjoyed. And people who are older, ones who are old enough to want a nostalgic experience, they tend to have disposable money that they can spend on these things. So they don't mind spending money to be brought back in time like that. And the Sphere accidentally realized this. And they realized this when they ran The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is exactly as it sounds. It is the movie from 1939 that you've seen on TV since you were a kid. And they've cut it down somewhat. They've cut it down to like 75 minutes. The original movie was 102 minutes, but now it's around 75. Most of the scenes they cut out were not that important, so people report that they don't really even notice that it's missing. So they don't feel like they're watching a partial movie. They're pretty good at figuring out what to cut. And unlike watching this on the small screen, here you are surrounded by the Wizard of Oz. Because remember, you're inside the sphere, and it's totally surrounding you, like you're part of it. And they've added special effects, such as when the tornado happens, and then they make a little tornado happen inside the sphere, and papers blow around in the air in a circular motion. And when apples are thrown at Dorothy, stuffed apples fall from the sky and land in lucky people's seats, and they get to keep it as a souvenir. And when the flying monkeys take flight in The Wizard of Oz, and you see them flying over you on the screen, you'll also see flying monkeys actually inside the sphere flying over your head. So they have all these additional live effects to go along with The Wizard of Oz. I think they even introduced some smells into it to correspond with the film as well. It is very well reviewed. People really enjoy it. I haven't heard anything bad said about The Wizard of Oz. It's expensive. The very cheapest you're going to get a ticket is like $117, and that's the worst seats in the house. From what I'm hearing, no seat is terrible, but yes, there is a difference in where you sit. The consensus I'm hearing is the best place to sit is the middle level, as close to center as possible. But the minimum you're going to pay for even the worst seat is like $117, and the busier performances that are selling better, the minimal ticket will be even higher, because that's adjusted based upon the demand, but never adjusted down below 117 apparently. Everybody likes it. I haven't heard anyone say, wow, I spent all this money on these tickets just to see a damn movie that I've seen a million times. What a waste of money. This thing sucked. Oh, this wasn't very interesting. Oh, the effects they put in there, very underwhelming. I haven't heard that from anybody. Everybody seems to like it. Everyone seems happy they spent the money. So word of mouth got around. First of all, everyone was excited about it. Like when they announced this, everybody's reaction was, I want to go see this. I heard that over and over and over again, and that was my reaction. I want to go see this. That was the first time I said that about anything in the sphere. This Postcards from Earth thing, I was like, if it wasn't for the crappy second half of it, yeah, I might go see it, but now that I hear the second half sucks, forget it. And even if the whole thing was good, I would have been only moderately interested. But The Wizard of Oz, that sounded cool. I had the same nostalgic feeling coming on. Like, wow, a Sphere Wizard of Oz where they actually do live effects with it? That'll be neat. So that's what everybody thought. And even though it opened in late August, it has been selling like gangbusters. And they have sold tons of tickets. So how has it done? I've already told you some things here that it's successful. But how successful? Well, would you believe that as of October 20th, less than 2 months after the show opened, they had sold 1 million tickets to The Wizard of Oz. Wow. 1 million tickets. Now keep in mind, the cost per showing is pretty low, because they don't have to pay a famous headliner all kinds of money to perform there. And they're basically running the same show over and over and over again. Yeah, they have to keep making new stuffed apples, but that's very cheap. They have to maintain the equipment that does the live effects, but that's not very hard once it's already built. So once they've got this thing established, they can run this thing very cheaply and just print money over and over and over again. Whoever thought of this was genius, even if they didn't realize how successful it was going to become. And it continues to do well enough to where they don't even have a planned end date. They had thought this was going to be a shorter run than it's turning out to be. But they said they don't even know when they're going to end. And in fact, they are going to upgrade it at some point next year to do a little bit more. They're going to call it the 2.0 version. And they're going to make some changes and hoping to bring some people back to see the 2.0 version once they've enjoyed the 1.0 version. But they're even waiting with that because they want people to see the 1.0 version first. Now, this has really made an impact. They've finally found the formula over there. Now, yeah, sure, they still have their concerts, but they finally found the formula. Because you know what? When everybody gets tired of the Wizard of Oz there, because people are going to see this over and over, it's eventually going to run out of people. But there's an endless library that they can tap into of other movies that people are going to have nostalgia for. And once they get the agreement from whoever owns the rights to these movies, once they get the agreement to show it at the Sphere and prepare the treatment for it like they did with The Wizard of Oz, then they can do the exact same thing again and again and again. Like, I'm just speaking off the top of my head here, but how cool would it be to see the original Star Wars there? I bet you'd enjoy that, right? I know I would. They could come up with so many movies that they show at the Sphere and add live effects to, and people will keep coming. Especially if they do it well, which they have with The Wizard of Oz. Now, it's true only certain types of movies would really work out this way. They can't really show a drama there because there's not really effects to do. It needs to be movies that have some kind of action that have effects, but there's a whole lot of movies to choose from. And all they have to do is find movies that are going to appeal to Gen Xers or Boomers. Because that's really who this is aimed at because of the expense. But you find nostalgic movies to put there, make some cool effects with them, throw them in there for 2 years or so, prints money. And once you get it established, it's very cheap to run. Very, very good formula. They have not stated yet they're going to run other movies there, but they would be morons not to. I'm sure they're not that stupid. So what effect has it had? Well, they've released some financial information to show you how badly they were struggling. In quarter 3 of 2024, this is way before the Wizard of Oz came, the Sphere had an operating loss of $125.1 million and an adjusted operating loss of $26.3 million. Now, let me stop right there and explain the difference between the two. An operating loss is just a simple calculation of the amount of money they lost during that time period. An adjusted operating loss excludes what are considered one-time or unusual expenditures. This has to do with non-recurring items like restructuring costs, stock-based compensation, asset sale gain and losses, extraordinary research and development expenses, stuff like that. So I'm not sure what they're really adjusting here in this case, but it is a publicly traded company that owns the Sphere, so they can't pull shenanigans to much of an extent as far as the loss versus adjusted operating loss. So they were saying here that in quarter 3 2024, they lost $125 million, and even when you do the adjusted operating loss and take out the one-time expenses, they still lost $26.3 million. Now, it's much worse. In quarters 1 through 3 2024, this is January through the end of September, they lost $313 million, and the adjusted operating loss was $18.9 million. So they can say, well, adjusted operating loss, blah, 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 but the bottom line is they lost $313 million of real money. In quarter 3 2025, now remember that encompasses only 1 month of The Wizard of Oz, which of course hasn't been operating for that long. It's only been going for 2.5 months now, but it came in late August. So it was like a month plus of The Wizard of Oz because quarter 3 ends on September 30th. Quarter 3 2025, the operating loss was $84.4 million compared to $125 million the previous year. And they actually had an adjusted operating profit of $17.4 million. First time they had that. Quarter 1 through 3 2025, the operating loss was $261 million. Remember, most of that was before Wizard of Oz was there. And the operating profit was $55.2 million. So what does all this mean? Well, basically what they're trying to show is that if you ignore the non-recurring costs, the Sphere actually made $17 million in the quarter 3 of 2025 and $55 million the first 3 quarters of 2025. Now, I don't know how much of that is entirely attributed to Wizard of Oz because it only ran for a little more than a month of quarter 3 2025. But I do believe that's a big factor here, and I believe it's highly profitable, and things are really looking up there. What would be Wizard of Oz 2.0? Well, they claim that they're going to try to release it around August of 2026. It's going to have new features such as, quote, a ride on the witch's broom. Now, you're not going to physically be riding on it, but they're going to position it like when the witch is flying, the Wicked Witch, that it'll feel like you're on the broom with her. If you look up at the Sphere, it'll feel like you're in motion on her broom. So they're going to add little features like that. That doesn't sound like live features where you're seeing physical things fall or fly around you, but that it'll be a new effect that they're adding to the movie itself. Upon the announcement of these better financials, the stock of the MSG Sphere owner popped from 64 to 71 before slipping back to 69 by close. I still think the company has issues. I mean, they still have a massive operating loss. Forget the adjusted crap. The actual operating loss is still pretty high. But they've only had Wizard of Oz going for 2.5 months now. So once this thing runs for a whole year, they may be profitable. It is possible the demand will die down pretty quickly and abruptly, and then they won't make as much as they were expecting. But the good thing for them is that the expense of running it is pretty low. So even if it falls off a cliff, then they just have to kick their asses into gear and get something else there to replace it that's similar to it. And people will come back. Because you just use common sense in these things. If you go see Wizard of Oz, if this is something that appeals to you as someone who is Gen X or older, and you go there and it was very well done, and you really enjoyed it, and it was a nice experience, albeit expensive, when the next movie comes there, are you going to want to come back and want to see the next movie, or are you going to say, well, I saw the Wizard of Oz here, I don't have to see anything else? No, you're going to want to come back because it's a totally different movie. As I said, if they bring Star Wars there, which they haven't talked about, but let's say they bring Star Wars there, you're not going to say, well, I saw Wizard of Oz, I don't need to see Star Wars. No, you're going to want to see what they do with Star Wars. So this really is an endless well which they can draw from. And that doesn't mean they can't continue doing other things with the Sphere. But now they finally found the formula. And of all the talk of the Sphere, I don't think anyone ever came up with this. I didn't hear one person saying, you know what they should do? They should show old movies there and add effects to them. And everyone will want to see it. I never thought of that. I don't know anybody who thought of it. So really, props to whoever came up with this idea. I don't think they realized how successful it would be. But props to whoever came up with this idea. But I'll tell you something. In general, there is a very big market for nostalgia among those who are Gen X or boomers. There really is. If you do a poor job with it, then they're not going to like it, and it's not going to do well. Why do you think Stranger Things did so well on Netflix? I know some people abandoned it because it got kind of repetitive and the story dragged out a little too long and there was too many years between seasons. I understand all that. By the way, they're releasing the final season like in 10 days. But why was this so popular the first year? Why was this a big deal on Netflix? It was nostalgia. It was because it takes place in the 80s. In fact, the kids depicted in Stranger Things were the exact same age in the year it took place as I was in that year. So it was really like watching kids my own age in that year. So people in Gen X loved it because they were basically seeing a depiction of their own childhood. But even people older than Gen X liked it because they saw depictions of the 80s that were done fairly well. So even though it was a horror film, or a horror series, shall I say, people liked it for the nostalgia. If it took place in modern times, it wouldn't have done anywhere nearly as well. So if you do something nostalgic and you do it correctly, and you do it creatively, it's like a guaranteed win, guaranteed success. in any form of entertainment. I don't know why we're not seeing more of this. Before I finish this Wizard of Oz topic, you may wonder, since it's so expensive, is there a way to get a discount? Can you get cheaper tickets to the Wizard of Oz? Is there any way to do that, or are you stuck paying this exorbitant rates to see a movie? Well, I wondered that too. Unfortunately, it's very difficult. Is there a locals discount? There is not. Is there some kind of discount code you could enter? No. Is there a government or military discount? No. Is there a discount for certain showings? No. Can you buy tickets to it from these cheap ticket sites or cheap ticket outlets like this Tix for Tonight? No. So is there any way to get the cheaper tickets? Well, maybe. First of all, if you look at Reddit, occasionally someone posts in the Sphere subreddit that they're giving away tickets. Now, you got to be there. Usually it's like a last-minute thing. It's like, hey, I can't make it tonight. Who wants my tickets for free? And if you respond quickly, you can get free tickets. Don't bother with the secondary ticket sites like StubHub. Those are always more expensive than the box office, so you're actually going to pay more there. I don't know who's dumb enough to buy it there. But I have heard a rumor. I have not verified it yet, but I have heard a rumor. And by the way, there's no seniors discount either. I have heard a rumor that if you go to the box office in person on a day or showing that is slow, that's not selling out, because it's not selling out every time. So if you go to one of the slower performances on the day of, and from what I've seen, that's the evening ones, the ones that are 8 o'clock. If you go there and ask them if there's any cheaper tickets they can sell you for day of, that they may say yes. Not verified by me yet. If I do it successfully, I will let you know. But that's what I'm hearing. But it's unreliable at this point. So don't be mad at me if you try that and it fails. If you want to save money, though, I would advise walking physically into the box office and asking, is there any way that you sell tickets cheaper? You know, same day, 10 minutes beforehand, if it's not selling well. You know, can you just be honest with me? Is there just any way I can buy cheaper tickets here? And you can even bullshit them and say, well, I can't really afford the current prices. So, you know, is there a time that I can get at the last minute that it's cheaper? If you're not selling well, if I'm willing to take the chance that you may or may not have them for that price. And they may tell you the truth, because I've seen it reported online that someone successfully did this. So I'll be checking on this myself. If you want to wait a little bit, it's possible if it slows down, they might start offering deals, especially to locals. But right now, there's nothing. Well, this segment is aimed at those who live or lived in Vegas. But if you didn't or don't, you are welcome to listen also, because it's pretty interesting. When you got your electric bill, especially in the summer, I bet you were disappointed at how expensive it was. You know, Vegas gets very hot. AC is expensive to run. Even in just an apartment, the cost can add up. Well, what if I told you that there's a decent chance that you were cheated by the local electric company in Las Vegas? Yes, you might have been. This is not a rumor. This is a fact. In December 2024, some Vegas area residents got a letter from NV Energy, which is the sole electricity provider in the region, stating that they have been accidentally overcharged. It turned out that many multifamily residences, meaning townhomes, condos, and apartments, were incorrectly classified as single-family homes. And apparently, single-family homes are billed at a higher rate per kilowatt hour. And a kilowatt hour, by the way, is you using 1 kilowatt of electricity for 1 hour. And that's how electricity is billed. So the per kilowatt hour rate is higher for single-family homes than multifamily residences such as townhomes, condos, and apartments. So people got notified in December 2024 that they have been paying too much for quite some time because they were incorrectly classified as a single-family home. Well, one of these residents was not happy about this because they did not get back very much money. All they got back was for the past 6 months. And when this resident called up NV Energy and said, wait, was this mistake only starting 6 months ago? And they said, no, it goes back a very long time, but we're only giving you the last 6 months back in the difference because that's all we have to do. Can you imagine how obnoxious? Yeah, we've overbilled you for many years, but we're only giving you the last 6 months because that's all the law requires us to do. So F you. So this resident was not very happy about it, and they went to local TV station KTNV 13, and they went to a journalist at that station named Darcy Spears. I almost said Darcy Spheres, but I'm combining two stories here. But this is Darcy Spears. It would be cool if it was Darcy Spheres. That'd be a perfect transition. But this is Darcy Spears. She does a segment called Darcy, What's the Deal? And it's a consumer advocacy segment. And this resident brought this notification to Darcy, who then went forward to investigate the matter. And Darcy then uncovered a tremendous overcharge to residents in the greater Las Vegas area that dates back as far as 2002. Wow. Forget 6 months. Goes back over 22 years. Well, the full numbers came out on November 7th of 2025, and they are eye-popping. So after Darcy exposed this, then the government went to work to start pressuring NV Energy to fully investigate this and report what the extent of the overcharge was. NV Energy is believed to have overcharged customers between 2002 and 2024 a total of
$1 million.
Now, once again, way too low. $65.5 million. And probably more than that. $65.5 million of overcharges due to misclassifying what type of residence people had. Of course, this was charging more to people. This was not an error in their favor. Isn't that convenient? NV Energy admits that it overcharged $17 million since 2017. But they say their individual records stop there. They have gotten rid of everybody's records since before 2017, so they can't give further refunds. Now, the 6-month thing, that was all the law required at the time. That was true. But after Darcy Spears uncovered how bad this really was and how many people were affected, a new state law was passed in 2025 that requires NV Energy to reimburse everybody affected with interest. But the problem is they're having trouble recreating everything before April 2017 because all the records from before then have been destroyed, apparently. Which I don't know why they do that, because storage is so cheap these days. Like, I could keep all of the records for every NV Energy customer from 2002 until today on my personal laptop that I'm using to broadcast the show right now. So it's not like they have to spend a tremendous amount of money to store this stuff. This does not take up very much space. I don't know why they're deleting this stuff, but they apparently have deleted the records from before April 2017. But they admit that from what they can see from that point, they have overcharged people $17 million total. And the $65.5 million is what they're estimating for the whole thing. Now, how'd this happen? In 2002, there was a new, cheaper rate for multifamily properties. Remember, I was mentioning that the multifamily properties paid a lower rate than single-family homes. This started in 2002. It wasn't always like this. And apparently what happened was they did not switch over all of the apartments, condos, and townhomes. and accidentally defaulted a lot of them still to the single-family home rate. And this included existing customers and new customers, and even new construction that was built after 2002. Some of those were incorrectly classified as single-family homes. It is believed that from April 1st, 2017 to April 1st, 2024, 59,939 customers at 22,101 premises were overcharged by more than $17 million. Also, another 20,000 customers in multifamily accounts faced, quote, undisclosed overcharges. I'm not even sure what that was about. And that brought the total overcharged customers to about 80,000 during that 7-year span. So since 2017 all the way through April of 2024, about 80,000 customers of NV Energy in the Vegas area were overcharged. What percentage is that of their customers? Well, of the multifamily property customers, that's about 10% of them. So if you lived in an apartment or a condo or a townhome at any point between 2002 and 2024 in Las Vegas, there's a 10% chance that you got overcharged by NV Energy. Of those who were overcharged, over 3,000 of them were disconnected at some point due to non-payment. And it's possible that some of them would have avoided that fate had they been charged correctly. So that's especially outrageous. Now, how do you know if you were affected? Well, if it was from April 2017 forward, you would have been notified already. But in case you are hard to reach because you've moved or whatever, you may want to contact them or see if you can dig up an old bill. If it was from before that, you will have to dig up an old bill because they don't have the records anymore. But if you look at the bill, if you see anything there about multifamily, then you were charged correctly. And I actually dug up one of my old bills from 2012, and it actually says multifamily. So I'm okay. I actually don't have my bills from 2006. I wish I did because I lived in a different place then. But I did find my bill from 2012. And as I said, it was correct because it said multifamily. But if you lived in a multifamily property and it says anything about single family or RS, which stands for residential service, or RS1, then you were overcharged. If you were in a single family home and it says that, then it's fine. But if you were in a multifamily property and it says anything about single family or RS or RS1, then you actually got overcharged. And by law, they do have to reimburse you. Now, if that's true, if you do find that, I would just wait at this point and see what the procedure is, because right now if you try to submit it to them, they'll say they don't have a structure to pay you at the moment. But you should keep your eyes out and your ears open to see how you can perhaps submit a claim if you have old bills. And if you have old bills, don't throw them away. You might even be able to reconstruct how much they overcharged you based upon what old bills you have, or at least somewhat. By the way, there were some customers who were actually undercharged. I'm not sure how this happened, but I think maybe some single-family customers were put in the multifamily category. But the good news for those customers is no one's going to come after them for what they were undercharged. So those people just get away with it. But that was a small number of people. Seems like always in these situations, it always falls the wrong way. It's always, if you're being undercharged, they catch it very quickly. If you're being overcharged, it just keeps happening. Now here they actually caught themselves and notified people, and that's what started this whole thing. Had they never notified anybody, I don't think anyone would have figured it out. But because they notified that person and then would only give them 6 months worth back, and that person got mad and brought it to Darcy Spears, that's how this whole thing unraveled, and there's actually a new state law requiring them to pay people back with interest. But what a freaking mess. And how is it legal that they can delete records as recently as early 2017? How's that okay? I mean, as I said, this is not expensive to store. Why are they deleting that? I think they're doing it on purpose. I think they're deleting this stuff because they figure, hey, if anything ever comes up later, we want to have fewer records rather than more. So it's harder for anyone to collect from us, no matter what it is. So there should be a law requiring them to keep records for 100 years or something. That should be a very, very long time, especially because how cheap it is to store this stuff. And you might say, come on, Druff, there's no way you could store all those records on your home computer. And my answer is, no, I could, because text records do not take up very much space. What takes up a lot of storage space are videos or big applications or maps, things that would really take up a lot of space because they're holding a lot of data. Text takes up very little space. So the text of a bill, of an electric bill, that's negligible. Very easy to store tons and tons and tons of those records without taking much space at all. So I don't know why they're deleting things. There's no practical reason to delete these. Even if they want to take it offline and put it in a backup somewhere. But to just delete them entirely is also pretty outrageous. And these are public utilities. They're not publicly owned, but they're public utilities. They can't just make their own rules. So I have a feeling it was some moronic thing in the law that only required them to keep records for a certain number of years and then allows them to delete them. And it's probably antiquated. It probably goes back to when it was very hard to store a lot of records, maybe in the 1960s, for example. Then it would make sense to not keep records around for more than 8 years. But today, the fact that they have a right to delete people's records when it's so easy to store, it's insane. This is why sometimes you have to go back and revisit old requirements and change them to go along with the times. Especially anything that will be influenced by technology, which is constantly changing. So what a disgusting story there. I'm actually glad that I found they don't owe me anything, because I'd just be pissed off. Because if these old bills from like 2012 were showing that they did owe me something, then I would sit there angry and I'd know there's nothing I can do and I have to wait to see if possibly I can make a claim. And I only have like one bill from then, so I don't know how I would. And it would just really piss me off. I'd actually rather not get the money and just know I was charged right, as strange as that is. Like if I were to discover they charged me wrong, there's a possibility I would get money I didn't expect down the line. But here I'm actually happy to get no money because I know I was charged right. Finally, this is not a Vegas topic, but it's a casino topic. Have you been to the Fiore Steakhouse at Harrah's Rincon, a.k.a. Harrah's Southern California? You probably have if you went there in the 2010s. Fiore was a decent steakhouse. It wasn't wonderful or super memorable, but it was decent, especially for being out in the middle of nowhere where Harrah's Resort Southern California is. I've been there. It was pretty good. I did get a really, really bad stomach virus right after eating there, but it may not have been from there. So I can't entirely blame it on them. I was playing a lot in the casino prior to that, so it's possible I picked up the virus in the casino, as can easily happen. But that was actually the virus I picked up. See, I left the Rincon. This was in January 2014. I left the Rincon and I drove from there to Vegas. And I started feeling tired on the drive. And I thought I was just tired from maybe not getting enough sleep. But that was not why. It was because I was getting very sick and didn't know it yet. Then I got to Caesars where I was staying, and boy was I tired once I got there. I mean, I was super tired going there. And it was funny, going up the elevator after I had parked my car and I was bringing my stuff up. There was this girl in the elevator, and she was trying to make conversation with me. She was younger. She was in her 20s. I was 42 at the time. She was trying to make conversation with me, and she did ask me where I was from, and I told her, and it turned out she lived very close to where I lived at the time. And then she kept trying to talk to me. And this was just in the elevator, so it wasn't like a long conversation. But like past the whole thing about living close by, I just wasn't giving her very much of a response, giving kind of like one-word answers, because I was tired. And I didn't want to talk to some stranger bothering me in there. I just was not into talking to anyone right then because I felt like shit. She made a snide comment as she got out of the elevator and said, "You need to lighten up, dude. You're in Vegas." When she got out of the elevator. And I think, what the hell's her problem? I didn't ask for this conversation. I just want to go up to the damn elevator. It was like 2 a.m. So it turned out I got a really, really bad stomach virus, and I fainted the next day after I couldn't keep fluids down. And I broke 3 ribs. A pretty bad situation. So I do have that memory of possibly Fiore causing it, but very possibly not. As I said, it was something there at the Rincon, but it easily could have been something like the machines I was playing. But let's get back on topic. In July 2022, Fiore closed. And 5 months later, they opened a new restaurant in its place. So they used the same Fiore location inside Harrah's Resort, Southern California. But it was a totally different restaurant. What was it called? The new restaurant was Salt and Fin. Now, what would you expect Salt and Fin to be? If you walk by a restaurant, it says Salt and Fin. What would you expect it to be? Salt implying salt water, and fin being the fins of sea life there in the salt water. The reason this name is stupid is, first of all, the salt thing is already unappetizing. You don't want to think of the food being too salty. It's fine if food has salt in it, but you don't want a restaurant that's based around salt. And then the fin part, you don't eat the fins. When are you eating fins when you go to a seafood place? So why would it be called Salt and Fin? Someone was trying to get too creative there, and it was kind of stupid. But to be honest with you, the reason I'm covering this whole thing is because of that weird name. If it was not called Salt and Fin, I would have just looked right past the story and not cared. But because it was called Salt and Fin, I took interest. That's totally what happened here. I'm not kidding. So here's the announcement of Salt and Fin. This was to open in December of 2022. It said Harrah's Resort Southern California added a new restaurant to its dining roster just in time for the new year. Salt and Fin officially opened on Monday, December 19th in place of Fiore. Bradley Burkett, director of restaurants at Harrah's, said in a recent phone interview that the space was renovated in anticipation of opening Salt and Fin. The newly opened restaurant is the second to open at the property. And in August, and this is of 2022, Harrah's opened the first Hell's Kitchen in California. That's Gordon Ramsay's restaurant. The new dining concept, referring to Salt and Fin, adds variety to the property and highlights Southern California's affinity for seafood. Quote, the operations here were more geared towards a steakhouse or quicker type things, and with this new concept, we wanted to showcase the genre of food guests really cared for and wanted to see. Yeah, I'm sure that guests were begging for salty food and fins. Stupid. The new restaurant will serve dishes such as seafood chapino with Calabrian chile broth, whole grilled fish with fennel, and ocean water poached lobster. Ocean water poached lobster? What? What? What is that? Ocean water poached lobster. Here we are with the salt again. Ocean water poached lobster? I mean, yeah, lobsters live in ocean water, but what are they saying here? So weird. Other seafood delicacies include oysters, clams, and diver scallop ceviche. There are also veggie and gluten-free salads and steak and chicken dish options. Most plates run from $17 to $60 and source ingredients from local farms such as Stelhi Organics Farm in Valley View and Deep Sea Commercial Fishing in Oceanside. I guess where the salt and the fin comes in. The 65-65-foot space can seat approximately 136 guests. And this Burkett guy said, I think this restaurant has a good appeal for people in that, regardless of us being in a casino, we can also do really good seafood at a freestanding restaurant. Yeah, good luck. I don't think this would have succeeded in a freestanding restaurant. And I say that because it did not succeed in Harrah's, which is pretty tough to do when you have a captive audience there. It's a fairly busy property. So Salt and Fin has gone away. There is no more salt, there's no more fin. Now, what did people think of Salt and Fin? Well, many people hated it. I saw a lot of bad reviews, including, and I'm not making this up, A number of the reviews said that the bread at Salt and Fin was, what do you think? Yes, too salty. Oh, you think if you're going to call it Salt and Fin, you're going to be careful. You're going to say, okay, if we're going to make a restaurant based around salt, let's not make everything too salty, because that's what people are going to fear. That's what they're going to be expecting. That's what they're going to worry about. So let's make sure we don't overdo the salt. But of all things, the bread was too salty? How does that even happen? Well, at least I guess they lived up to their name, so I'll give them that. Well, a sign was posted on October 18th. This is 2025, we're back to. October 18th, 2025, a sign was posted in front of the restaurant stating that Salt and Fin has closed and that a new dining experience is on the way. However, we did some hard-hitting research here at Poker Fraud Alert, and I came up with some more information about the new dining experience. Is this perhaps something that's a different concept than Salt and Fin, but maybe not too different? Maybe like a hoof and steer? No. According to someone I spoke to, I was told that the existing mediocre Rita's Cantina, which has been there for a long time, will slide over to take Salt and Fin's spot. So they're just moving an existing mediocre Mexican restaurant into that spot, into a bigger spot. That's the new dining experience. More like an old dining experience. But what's going to happen to the former spot where Rita's was once they move? Well, supposedly it's going to be used temporarily for what they call quick dining options, which I assume are going to be lousy pre-made sandwiches. And then they will decide what to do with the space. Maybe they will keep the quick dining options, and they're even tossing around the idea of using the space for a nightclub. Isn't that nice? Anyway, once this happens, or I guess currently also, this gives visitors to Harrah's Resort Southern California 4 sit-down dining options as we stand today. The aforementioned Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen, Rita's Cantina, a place called The Cafe, which is like a coffee shop, and KJ's Chinese Restaurant. Now, KJ's Chinese Restaurant is hated. It is hated. It makes Salt and Fin look like a 3-star Michelin restaurant. The reviews for KJ's are so bad, you wouldn't believe it. It makes the Flavortown reviews look great. They try to sell it as authentic Chinese food, but people really hate the place. Now, some people are okay with the food itself. The food itself, I wouldn't say is hated. Some don't like it, some do like it. The food, there's mixed opinions. The service is the problem. People despise the service there. And it starts from the moment you sit down. Apparently, and this is according to reviews, I haven't done this myself, I haven't been there to see this myself, so take it with a grain of salt and a fin. If you go to KJ's at Harrah's, when you sit down, they actually toss the menus at you. Like a frisbee. Then you sit down and the rude maitre d' or host, whoever's sitting you down, they sit you down and they go, here's the menu, whoosh, and they throw the menu at you, according to several reviews I read. And not like to be cute or as a gimmick, like just to be assholes. Like they can't even set it down nicely or hand it to you. They actually toss it to you like they don't want to put in any more effort than that. And then just that sets the tone for the whole service, which people describe as very rude, all the way up to the management, where they complain to the management and it's just as bad. One of the reviews from August 31st, 2025 says, service from the employees were very unprofessional. From the minute they seated us, they were rude, rushed us for our orders, and when my brother tried asking for more soup bowls, the lady just walked away. That's funny. So they wanted like extra bowls to share or something, like empty bowls, and her brother's like, yeah, can I have some more soup bowls, please? And the waitress looks at him and just turns around and walks off. What a bitch. Another review from October 25th, 2025. The food is average and overpriced for what it is and what you get. The service is dreadful. Zero attentiveness from the staff. Food delivery at the table is inconsistent. Some orders came out wrong. The ambiance is dreadful. Cigarette smoke-filled casino, dirty tables, and tableware. There's so many bad reviews here. It makes your head spin. Looking at Yelp right now. Now, at least this person didn't have the menus thrown at him. It says, I went to Harrah's for the weekend, stopped at this restaurant. The food was good, pricey for Chinese. The service, ridiculous rude, horrible service. They seat us down, 3 menus on the table. Oh, no, I guess they misspelled it. They said, I thought it said 3 menus on the table. They actually misspelled it, and they meant to say through the menus on the table. So this person got it thrown at them too. Okay, never mind. I thought it said 3 menus on the table because they wrote 3, but they meant through. Asked the waiter for tea 3 times. He kept walking away. He finally brought it. We ordered our food. We never saw the waiter again. We wanted more tea. Never got it. Such rude people working there. I will never eat there again. Why is it like this? This isn't like a little Chinese place at a mini mall run by a rude family. This is at the freaking Rincon. What's the problem? July 23rd, 2025. I hate to write a review like this, but it needs to be done. The food was not good. We ordered orange peel chicken. It was gross. It had a funky smell and taste. That sounds gross. Like orange peel chicken, if it's going to have a funky smell and taste, that just sounds really unappetizing. My wife wanted me to smell the chicken, and it seemed it was cooked in rancid oil. We also ordered the beef chow mein, and it was okay, but a little greasy. The egg rolls were not all that either. The rice was the only decent thing. The meal came to $64, and I gave a tip. After my meal, the daughter got a really bad stomach ache. We will never go back. That one was bashing the food. This one from Bianca G., July 12th. It's so offensive how horrible this place is. The staff is absolutely awful, like awful. First, our waiter rolled his eyes when we were ordering. Only 4 out of the 6 items that our party ordered came out. While waiting for the others, a different waitress came to our table to ask why we're still there. Yes, that's what she said. Why are you still here? To which we replied, we're still waiting for the rest of our food. After an annoying exchange of no, you didn't, yes, we did. I just asked if we can get the 2 extra items. Of course, we can't suddenly. So whatever, I asked for our check. She came back, hovered while I paid, and scoffed at my 15% tip. Girl, did you really think you deserved more after arguing and denying us more of the order? This place sucks so much. Is this actually run by the Rincon? I mean, whatever it is, if it's third party and they're leasing it out, they should boot them. And if they're running it themselves, what the hell? This is a type of place that really needs like a high roller to go to their host and really raise hell and get something changed. I got something changed at the Rincon. I'll finish with this story because I'm not going to read any more of these KJ Chinese food reviews, as bad as they are. I think you get the point. But I'll tell you, I may have talked about it before on this show, but it's been a long time, so I'll tell you again. I got a policy change there at Harrah's Rincon in the mid-2010s that was really, really annoying people. Everybody hated it. And I should get a medal for what I did here because I did a very nice thing for future customers and for the hotel itself, honestly. They used to have a lot of very customer-hostile policies there. And for whatever reason, even though it's all the Indian tribe running it, it's owned and managed by the Indian tribe over there and has a Caesars affiliation. And I don't know why the hotel and the casino are kind of separate, but they are. And like they're not separate ownership, but they operate very independently. And that caused a lot of problems. So what would happen would be that if you had a comp reservation, as I did back then, if you showed up after 8 o'clock, they would charge you $80 for a no-show. I'm not kidding. They charged you $80 for a no-show at 8 o'clock. I'm not saying if you're not there by 4 in the morning. 8 o'clock. The reasoning was that most people check in by 8, and there's an $80 no-show fee. So what they do is they charge you the $80, and then what they're supposed to do if you show up after 8 o'clock is take it back off. So it's not a charge you can't reverse. If you do actually show up that night after 8, they will reverse it. They're supposed to reverse it. That's the policy. The problem would occur that the reversals sometimes wouldn't happen. They'd forget, they would try and somehow it wouldn't work. So this was an extra step that was required, where somehow the 80 would automatically charge you at 8 o'clock, but then getting that 80 off didn't always happen. So I came back one time from staying at Harrah's Rincon, and I saw that there was an $80 charge. I don't remember how long it was after I'd been there, but it wasn't that long. Maybe it was a few days, and I was looking at my statement online, and I saw $80, and I was like, oh, crap, not this. So I called up, and I expected to speak to the front desk, and they were going to see that I checked in the day I said that I was going to be there, and that the $80 just wasn't reversed properly, and they would reverse it. And, in fact, I'd been through this before, and they had reversed it. So I knew exactly what this $80 was, but this was the first time it didn't come off. Usually I'd see an $80 charge and then an $80 credit on my statement. Here I just saw $80 charge and no credit. So I thought it'd be as simple as calling up and speaking to the front desk. And back then you could reach the front desk. It wasn't like now where you get routed to the Philippines. So I expected to get the front desk. I'd tell them about this, and they would take the $80 off, because it's obvious it should come off because I checked in the night I was supposed to, and that would be that, right? That's what seems like should happen. But that's not what did happen. I called up, and I got the operator, and I said, I'd like to speak to the front desk. And she said, what about? So I told her what about. And she said, oh, you can't speak to the front desk for that reason. You have to speak to the billing department. So I said, okay, fine, transfer me to them. Well, I can't transfer you to them. They are actually not taking phone calls. You have to leave them a voicemail. I said, I already feel uncomfortable with this. It's one thing if they've got certain hours they're there, but if they just never answer the phone, then I don't want to just leave a voicemail. They're never going to call me back. I know it. So can I please just speak to someone about this? And she says, nope. The policy is any billing issue, you have to leave a voicemail to the billing department, and they will get back to you. And I said, no, that's unacceptable. I'm not taking this here. They erroneously charged me $80. It didn't come off. It's supposed to come off. I can prove it's supposed to come off. I want to speak to a live person. If I have to call back at a different time of day, that's fine. Just tell me when. But I'm not going to just leave a voicemail about it. I'm just not doing it. Well, she said, too bad. You can't speak to the front desk. We're not going to let you speak to the front desk over this. And she hung up on me. So I thought, oh, we're not taking this. And I was a 7-star then, too. I was a 7-stars member, so I was also entitled to a higher level of service. But to be honest, no matter what level I was, this should not have been happening. So I called back, and same operator. I, again, tried to reason with her. She said no and hung up on me. Called back a third time. I told her, look, I just want this $80 removed. She says, I told you what to do. You have to leave a message for the billing people. Now, you may be wondering right now, why are you being such a dick about this, Druff? Why not just follow the instructions and do what everybody else does? Well, I don't know about you, but how many times when you leave a message to a big business do you ever get a call back? Just think about it. What percentage of the time where you've left a message like this on a voicemail, how often do you get called back from a big business? Probably a very small percentage of the time, right? That's been my experience in life. Everybody I've spoken to has told me that that's been their experience as well. So I wanted to speak to a human being who could just take off this $80 that I was erroneously charged. That was the least they could do for me after charging me something they should not have charged. They weren't doing me a favor here. So anyway, again, the operator said she's not doing it. She hung up on me again. She was actually hanging up on me. I called back a fourth time. I got her and I said, look, I'm a 7-stars member here. I really don't appreciate what you're doing to me here. I just want this charge taken off. I don't want to leave voicemails and sit by the phone waiting for them to call me back. And who knows if they're going to reach me. I'm not that easy to reach. Let me just speak to someone. I know there's people there at the front desk right now. If you want me to call at a less busy time, that's fine. Just tell me a time I can call back and speak to the front desk. And she told me, I'm absolutely not going to let you through the front desk. In fact, if you call and I hear your voice, I'm just going to hang up on you. So you're not speaking to the front desk ever. It's not happening. I'm going to make sure you never get a hold of them. She actually said that to me. I was furious. fury. I mean, imagine telling this, especially to a 7 Stars member. So I thought, what do I do here? What do I do? I thought, I know what I do. So I waited about 20, 30 minutes, called back, and she answered. And I said, "Hello, Colonel Nigel Fabersham here. I hate to trouble you, but I found in my room there's bed bugs all over the place. It's most dreadful, and I'm quite unhappy about this. Can you give me the front desk, please, so I can get a room change?" And she says, "Oh, of course, sir." So she transferred Colonel Fabersham with his bed bugs to the front desk. Fortunately, she didn't ask what room he was in. So front desk answered, hallelujah. Got a hold of them. I told them everything that had happened. I told them about the $80 charge. Told them about the terrible operator that would not let me speak to them. And they said, "We're very sorry about this. Yes, they should have transferred you here. It is true that we asked the operators to try to gatekeep and keep calls away that are unnecessary for the front desk, but they should never outright refuse someone to speak to us if they really insist. They should try to encourage people to speak to a different department if that's what should be done. But if they really insist to speak to us about a hotel matter, they should always transfer us here, that she was making a mistake, and she definitely shouldn't have told you that she's always going to hang up on you when she hears your voice. Like that, she's totally out of line. They were really sorry about this. We're going to report this." And they sounded sincere. I said, "Okay, can you get the $80 off?" They said, "Yes, we're definitely going to get the $80 off. Don't worry about that. We're really sorry." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I was willing to let it drop at that. But a week passed and the $80 didn't come off. Gave it a few more days because, refunds take longer than charges. So I gave it a few more days, but no, $80 didn't come back off. So I called back, and this time I said, I'm just going to go with the manager. I'm not going to go fighting with operators again. So I just said, "When's the hotel manager in?" They told me. I called at that time. They transferred me to the manager. I spoke to the manager, who apparently was a new manager at the time, who had just started working there about 2 months ago. 2 months ago, back then, that is. I told her the whole story. And she said, "First of all, I have not heard of any of this, and it's getting me mad because this should have been reported to me. All this whole thing should have been reported to me by both the front desk and this operator, and they did not do that. They're supposed to report any things like this that go on here, where a customer is very unhappy with how they're treated. So that's the first problem. This should have been reported already, and they didn't, and I'm really sorry about that. Number two, I'm definitely going to take off the $80. That's a mistake. And in fact, we're going to revisit whether we're going to charge this $80 at all, because it may not make sense." And I said, "Yeah, it makes no sense. Why would you ever charge us at 8 o'clock? They said, "Well, we've had this problem with people who make these comp reservations, and then they just decide to no-show, and it's very frustrating." I said, "Yeah, but why 8 o'clock? Well, we didn't want to burden the night staff with doing a whole lot at once, so we just configured the system to do it at 8 o'clock. But yeah, that's probably too early, and so we're going to revisit this." And I said, "Okay, but what about the operator who were the gatekeeping and like saying she's going to hang up on me when she hears my voice?" And she said, "Yeah, that's really awful. I'm appalled that this is going on here. We do instruct the operators to try to help people without constantly transferring to the front desk and bothering them when they're trying to check people in, but she should never be getting in a war with customers for transferring. Like, that's absolutely out of her realm of duties or authority. She had no right to do this to you. I'm really furious about this," she told me. And she said, "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We've had a lot of service issues at this hotel. We have a lot of people complaining to their hosts that the front desk mistreats them, and that in general they have a bad experience in the hotel portion, with the service being very bad. And in fact, that's why they removed the previous manager and hired me, that I'm here basically to clean things up. And this is one area we have to improve things." So the fact that the operator felt that she had a right to do this to you, the fact that the front desk was somehow unable to get this money off, even though they promised it. And I even checked with them, by the way. I kept saying, "Are you sure you can get it off? Can you make sure it really happens after all this?" And they said, "Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes." So she said, "A lot of problems here." And she was pissed off that the front desk didn't report this to them, or to her. The operator didn't report this to her. So she says, "First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to refund it right now, give you the $80 back. But second, I'm going to call an all-hands meeting to every person who works in the front here and all the operators. We're going to call an all-hands meeting, and we're going to discuss this whole thing." So apparently an all-hands meeting was called about my situation. And she chewed out everybody. She scolded the front desk for their handling of this whole thing. The fact that this wasn't reported to her, the whole incident and said, why are we even doing this with this $80? It doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this at 8 o'clock? How come you're not reporting to me that everybody hates this? Because she said, she asked front desk employees, are the customers very unhappy about this in general? And they're like, well, yeah, we get a lot of complaints. Yeah, a lot of people hate it. And she's like, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell me before? Why are you keeping this all to yourselves? Well, we've always done it this way. People, they can get over it. Well, do you sometimes forget to reverse it? Well, yes, we sometimes do. But, we have that billing voicemail. She said, that's also a good question. He was told to call the billing voicemail to get this fixed. Who's actually manning the billing voicemail? Who's actually in that department? I don't know of a billing department we have here. Who's actually dealing with this? And they said, well, the truth is actually nobody. So she found out that this goes into a black hole. There was a voicemail, but anything left there just gets deleted, that no one handles it. She couldn't believe this. Why is that? Well, we just never really found someone to take responsibility, so every so often we just clear the messages. So she was furious to hear this whole thing. She says, no wonder we're getting so many complaints about the way the hotel operates. And then she confronted this operator and said, this guy's a 7 Stars member. Why would you do this to him? Why would you create this battle? Why were you hanging up on him and telling him he's never going to get through to the front desk in his life? Oh, I don't know. I just kind of got caught up in the moment. He just was being stubborn. I just wanted to make sure he wasn't going to bother them. And he was being so persistent with calling back. I don't know. I just let it get too far. And so I don't know what happened to that operator. Hopefully she got fired because she deserved it. But imagine telling a customer, you're never getting through to the front desk. When I hear your voice, I'm going to hang up on you. Imagine being that obnoxious when she has no authority to do that. So she got really chewed out by the manager. And I know this because the manager herself told me. The manager called me back after that meeting and told me the whole thing. And she said, the good news is, as a result of this meeting, I have decided that we are doing away with this $80 charge forever. It's just too much trouble. They don't know how to handle it there. The fact that nobody was answering that voicemail of the billing, and the fact that this operator was hanging up on you because you didn't want it, and you were right because no one checks it. She said you were right the whole time. So we're doing away with the $80 charge. I've also told the operators, all of them, under no circumstances can they absolutely refuse to connect someone to the front desk. And anyone who does that is going to get fired. And everybody knows, again, a very strict rule that any altercations with any customers have to be reported to me. So a whole new set of procedures were started because of this incident. That was at Harrah's Rincon in the mid-2010s. So if you hated that $80 charge, or if you hated the way the operators acted there, or if you didn't like the front desk and suddenly things got better, you have me to thank. I'm not kidding. You have me to thank. There's some people who will listen to this story who will think I'm the bad guy in this. Oh, look what you did to these employees. Oh, you got them in trouble with their boss. Oh, you may have gotten that operator fired when she was just trying to alleviate needless calls to the front desk. And, oh, why can't you ever listen to instructions? Now, see, I have certain rights as a consumer. If I get erroneously charged money on my credit card, I have a right to talk to someone about it. And I knew that voicemail was bullshit. I was right. I was right the whole time. No one even checked it. And especially if I'm an upper level customer, then I really need to speak to somebody. And when service is bad, when something's unusual, like there's no other property I've ever encountered in my life that charges you $80 for not showing up by 8 o'clock and then refunds it if you show up. I've never seen that in my life except there. So anything non-standard like that then when it messes up, they don't handle right, that's their problem, not mine. I don't need to follow their persnickety rules that the operator sets up that defy common sense or treat me like crap as a customer. Like, let's say I wanted a favor from them, and they say, well, you have to leave it on the voicemail, they'll call you back. I still think that's kind of crappy, but I'd understand that more because I'm asking for a favor, so I'm more willing to play their game. But when they've screwed me, I don't need to jump through hoops for them. They need to just fix it. And something I despise, and I'll never take from anybody, is when a low-level employee decides to fuck with me. The low-level employee does not have the right to fuck with me. You may say that I'm being an elitist, But I'm not. It's just the reality of business that the low-level employee, and I know because I've been one. I was a low-level employee when I was younger. I worked as a teenager as a very low-level employee. And I did not have the right to fuck with customers. If I did that, I would be fired. There were customers I sometimes didn't like, but I did not fuck with them or I was not rude to them. When you are a low-level employee, you need to do your job as the way you're told to do it. It's not your right to mess with customers you don't like or just invent powers that you feel you should have, which you really don't. So when someone who is a low man on the totem pole decides they're going to punish me when it's not their business, then I'm going to make sure that their boss finds out about it. And I'll be truthful about what happened. I'm not going to exaggerate. I'm not going to lie, but I'm going to make sure the boss finds out about it. Because they should. It's one thing if the owner of the business is rude to me or screws with me. Well, then I don't come back there or I write a bad review or both. And then their business might suffer for it. But the low-level employee, then they don't get any consequences if I don't ever come back. If I write a bad review. So it's just not their authority to do. And I don't, like any human being, have the ability to mess with me or make my life difficult or miserable because they happen to be in a position at work where they can do it. Because otherwise they shouldn't have that power over me. They shouldn't have any power over me. So if they try to assert false power over me, then whoever supervises them should know about it and will know about it. Whereas I will never report someone for just making an accidental mistake. People are human. People make mistakes. But malicious things I will always report. And I always say, if you're someone who cannot handle dealing with customers that you don't like, if you can't help yourself but mess with customers you don't like, there's a very simple solution. Don't ever take a customer-facing job. Take a job where you're in the back somewhere and never deal with customers if you cannot deal with them. And there are some people like that. There's some people who just cannot deal with customers without stressing out or doing the wrong thing or letting their temper get the best of them. So fine, don't work in that position. But if you take a job like that, you have to do it the way you're supposed to do it. You can't take it out on customers. It wasn't my fault I got charged $80 I shouldn't have been. It wasn't my fault they have a voicemail they don't check. So anyway, that was my story from more than 10 years ago at Harrah's Rincon. Still blows my mind that they would charge you $80 after 8 o'clock. That's insane. Sometimes I think back to stuff in the past and I think, wow, did that really happen? Because that's just weird. That's one of those weird things. It's like a weird thing I almost can't believe was happening. 8 o'clock? How bizarre. Well, that's it. I didn't mean to tell that whole long story, but there it was. Well, I got through the topics here. By the time you hear this in the archives, if you're listening in the archives, well, that is it for the November 16th version of Poker Fraud Alert Radio. Isn't that weird? We had 2 episodes 2 days apart from one another, which was intended to be 1 episode, but I ran out of energy, so I made a second episode out of it. It was a split episode, but not the way I usually split it in the archives, where I did a big long show and just split it into 2 parts. These were really 2 episodes that were completely separate from one another on 2 entirely different days. So there, you get 2 episodes in a short time. That kind of makes up for the fact that I hadn't done any episodes yet in November, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Okay, maybe not. Well, the bad news is I may not be doing another episode in November because I've been averaging, like once every 3 weeks recently? So, being November 16th, that'll probably put us into early December when the next episode comes. I'm just being realistic here, but I don't know, maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe I'll do one at the end of November. The point is I'm still doing episodes. That's the point here. And I'm trying to cover topics you find interesting and amusing, even if they're not the biggest stories in the world. You know, like the Grand Bazaar Shops closing. That's not a front page story, but a lot of you play the World Series. I thought you'd be interested to hear about it. And just to hear the way Caesars operates and the reasons they decided to do what they're doing, or might be doing. I like covering stuff like that because you don't really get that anywhere else. You don't have other podcasts or radio shows covering stuff like this. So I try to cover the mainstream news and the not-so-mainstream news, so you get a little bit of everything here on Poker Fraud Alert Radio. Poker, sports, gambling, casinos, Las Vegas, and anything else under the sun that I choose to talk about. As always, thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with this show as infrequently as it may be these days. And as always, you know what I'm going to say here. Shalom.